Hello and welcome to Six Part. Today I'm gonna continue the story What If Naruto Had the Infinity Gauntlet Part 4. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up, and to watch more videos like this, subscribe to my channel and turn that bell notification on so you never miss an upload. Now wasting no more time, let's begin.
Izuku was sitting in a chair and staring at a big computer screen in an old, empty factory that had been turned into a secret base. As he slowly clenched his fist, he raised his infinity band. He saw a car nearby that was parked illegally next to a fire hydrant. Behind him, the car was slowly being crushed and rolled into a metal ball. This is a problem, he thought. He had spent the last 3 days training with the Gauntlet and trying to figure out what this strange behavior meant. He had truly made great strides with his idea. He didn't care much about the DNA he got. For some reason, the genetics never changed no matter how many times he looked at the blood sample. There was something wrong with this. Something about this quirk that he didn't get. Izuku threw the crumpled car away and said, "It looks like I need more data." He went over to a nearby table and grabbed a gray hooded sweater that was too big for him. He put it on over his black shirt, making sure that the hood covered his hair and the gauntlet. Izuku opened a portal and went to meet the only person who could give him the answers he was looking for. The station the head of Geonosis's research and development said, "I told you already. I didn't know he was up to this." He had been questioned by police at the station for 2 hours about their bad intern Izuku Midoriya. Police officer Naomasa asked, "He never did anything strange or suspicious. He was a brilliant boy dedicated to creating the best hero support devices," he said. "If a monster existed inside him, then he hid it very well." The officer let out a disappointed sigh and said, "Thank you for your time." Everyone he talked to said the same thing. Everyone had good things to say about Midoriya, and they were all shocked when they found out he was a bad guy. Before he could finish thinking, his phone rang. He called Toshinori when he saw his number. The hero asked, "How's the investigation going?" Naomasa grimaced and said, "Not well. Nobody had a clue about what Midoriya was or what he was secretly up to. Not the people at the company, his teachers, even his own mother didn't know." Toshinori was hopeful and asked, "Did he have friends at that school? He must have had some." He sighed and said, "From what I could tell, the boy didn't have any. We have no trail, and no leads as to what he will do next." Toshinori was not sure what the boy was up to because it had been 4 days and he still hadn't done anything. He now had a lot of power, so why isn't he using it? Either way, he'll have to show himself, Naomasa said with determination. The skinny man was excited as he said, "I have some good news though. I think I found a successor to inherit my power." "Really? Who is it?" "His name is Mirio, and he's in his 3rd year at UA, All Might said." "That's good. Are you going to pass on one for all to him soon?" Naomasa asked me. Toshinori sighed and said, "Not yet. I need to fix a mistake first before I retire." "Midoriya, right?" the detective asked with a frown. He knew that his friend had to stop the boy as his last heroic act. A master shouldn't leave their apprentice to clean up after himself. He made Izuku the way he is now, so it was his job to bring him back. "Good luck, my friend," he said, "Thanks," and then hung up. UA classroom. While lying on the floor in his yellow sleeping bag, Aizawa told his class, "Welcome back." After the provisional license exam, classes started up again. Katsuki Bakugo was the only one of his students who did not pass. He wasn't the best at everything after all. Aizawa didn't think that failing once would finally make him humble. "The principal wants me to take this time to review certain villains we want you all to watch out for." Everyone in the class woke up right then. In every fight they had with them, the League of Villains had been after them. The projector screen was lowered to show the most well-known pictures of the criminals who were still on the run. They gave each of them a name, talked about what little they knew about their quirks, and read some of the police's personality profiles on them. Shigaraki was the first. Then came Kurogiri and the other League members who got away during the raid. The slideshow had almost no pictures of Stain because he was such a hard-to-find killer. At last, they got to the last bad guy in the show. The screen showed a picture of a boy with dark green hair and a smile who was Izuku Midoriya, also known as Apotheosis. "This picture makes him look like a normal, innocent kid," Aizawa said in a dry tone. "You might recognize him as the biggest story right now." The next picture was a good close-up of him from 4 days ago. With a dangerous grin on his face and a dark glint in his eyes, he looked more like a bad guy now. Momo Yaoyorozu raised her hand when their teacher said, "He doesn't have any quirks at all." "Has there ever been a quirkless villain before?" she asked me. Aizawa said, "Yes, but we just call them criminals. A villain is defined by the government as someone who breaks the law and uses their quirk or quirks to do it. Those who lack a quirk can't be classified as villains under normal circumstances, but as you may have observed from the footage of Midoriya, that isn't the case anymore." "How is it that he has a quirk now?" Iida asked. He wanted to learn more about this Izuku Midoriya. He couldn't find much about apotheosis, but he did find some information about who he really was. He was a smart young man who did work as an intern for a top-notch IT company in the country. He even made a new robot that is supposed to fight bad guys. What would make someone like that do bad things but still be good enough to save him from the hero killer? He was still sure of everything Apotheosis had said to him that night. Aizawa scowled and said, "That's what we still need to figure out." They recently had a faculty meeting where they talked about this very subject with other heroes. No one really understood what Midoriya had done to make this happen. He said All For One didn't give him a quirk. Instead, he made one on his hand that looked like that gauntlet. But how in the hell was that possible? All we know is that gauntlet he wears you see in the photo has something to do with it. Katsuki Bakugo yelled, "Then just take it off of him." "What's the matter?" He didn't like looking at the picture of Deku. Okay, so at first he was shocked that the nerd who had always wanted to be a hero had turned bad. But then he got mad. What in the world did that jerk do? However, what made him even more angry was learning that the nerd was the bad guy who fought him at the USJ and tricked him at the training camp. He hadn't forgotten about that jerk Apotheosis yet. If Bakugo got to him first, he would destroy the nerd, so Deku should pray that All Might or another hero kills him. The other man replied, "I don't think it will be that easy, bro. I doubt he'll just sit there and let somebody take it from him." "Yes," Aizawa said, and was about to go on when he was stopped by another question. "Does anyone know what he's up to?" Ochako asked out loud. He glared at her and asked, "What does that matter?" He really didn't care what Deku was trying to do with this joke. "Well, there has to be a reason. One doesn't just wake up one morning and decide to become a villain," she said. He glared at Ochako, and she shot him one back with an accusatory look. How do we know he wasn't driven to this by the abuse and bigotry of other people? This blonde woman snapped at her. What the hell is that supposed to mean? She didn't try to avoid the truth, she just told it like it was. When they first met, her friend who had turned bad told her, "You used to pick on Midoriya, so you should know better than anyone about Izuku and Katsuki's past relationship." Everyone turned to look at the blonde with wide eyes. Bakugo yelled, "Shut up, round face," because he didn't like how everyone in the class was staring at him. He screamed, "You don't know anything." His hands were shaking with anger. Again with the yelling and fighting, Ochako kept her glare on. "How can you be a hero when that's your default? It's because of people like you that he became a villain in the first place." Before things got out of hand, Aizawa said, "Okay, that's enough. It's not our job to figure out Midoriya's motivation. That's for the psychologists to figure out when the heroes capture him," he said. All of this fighting was reminding him of the meeting they had about this before. Time Flex, then Vlad King asked, "Can someone please explain what the hell happened?" "From what I was able to gather, Izuku Midoriya has built a device that grants himself multiple quirks," Nezu said. "Isn't that right, All Might?" In his strong form, the hero said, "Yes." He looked at Endeavor and asked, "He seemed to be able to move things around and control them at will. What do you think?" The man with the flames reluctantly agreed with the number one hero. "You're right about that. He lifted up a wave of water like it was nothing to counter my flames." Aizawa told them, "Let's not forget how easily he threw All Might around." Endeavor glared at his rival and said, "He wouldn't have if you weren't so easy on him. You held back on purpose, didn't you?" All Might yelled at him, "Of course I held back," as he said, "Midoriya is just a boy. A misguided boy, but a boy nonetheless. I want to help him, not beat him to a pulp." He knew that Izuku had turned into a bad guy because of him. The words he used to make her feel rejected are what drove him to despair and this dark path. That's why the peace symbol had to admit he was wrong and steer the kid away from that path. "That boy destroyed a building and injured dozens of people, or did you forget?" Endeavor asked. All Might stood up for the boy and said, "Nobody was killed. I see that as a sign that there is still some good in Midoriya. There was also the time Izuku saved Iida from Stain and the time he protected Kota by beating the notorious bad guy Muscular." Midnight asked, "Can we back up for a second? A device that grants him multiple quirks? How is that even possible?" She wanted to know. Power Loader said, "She has a point. In the entire history of quirks, no one has ever been able to create a device that artificial grants quirks. If I wasn't so terrified that it's in the hands of a villain, I'd actually be impressed by the kid's genius." Endeavor asked, "Does anyone have the slightest idea how he did this? All evidence has been erased along with that building. Young Midoriya covered his tracks well," All Might said. "The police found his school dorm room empty and his computer was wiped clean." Aizawa finally asked, "What will he do next?" The number one hero frowned and said, I don't know. He thought the boy would want to get back at him, but he ran away instead. What he would do next was impossible to guess with the power he now had. End the backup. These are the bad guys you need to watch out for, but remember that they're not the only ones out there, Aizawa said, moving on to what the training for today would be. Bakugo scowled and stopped staring at Ochako with his eyes crossed. Doesn't anyone care why he's this? Uraraka was confused. It seems that beating up bad guys is what it means to be heroic these days. People don't seem to care that the bad guys used to be good people. Izuku was a good kid, so he wouldn't do this for no reason. But no one seemed to care about that. He is somewhere safe. I hope he is okay. UA Development Center. Power Loader saw that his student wasn't talking as much as she usually did and said, "You're awfully quiet." Mei didn't say anything but, and kept using the welder. The teacher turned off the machine because she was being too quiet. A sigh came from Mei Hatsume as she took off her goggles and wiped her face clean. "Okay, what's wrong?" "That's all," she said. "I knew him." Power Loader knew that Izuku Midoriya knew the bad guy before he told everyone. The police were too when they checked out people he knew. "You were friends with him." She was honest and said, "He didn't tell me anything about this, before you ask." "Hatsume," the teacher said to start. The other teachers and heroes believe that the Midoriya that you knew was just an act. The one we see now is the real one. What little evidence we have points to him having planned this for a long time. Why would be so nice to me? We shared ideas and theories with each other. Why would he do that? She wanted to know. Why would he be her friend? In fact, that's what she asked. Being a student at the UA, maybe he wanted to find out something from you, Power Loader said. Mei said, he never asked anything about UA, nothing classified anyway. The teacher asked, what do you mean? Mei said in a sad voice, he only asked me what it was like to go to a hero school. She could still see the desperate longing in his eyes when he asked her. He couldn't have lied about that. They were silent for a moment while Power Loader thought about what she said. You saw that bit of footage on the news, right? That glove he made. What do you think it is? Well, it looks to me like it grants him a powerful quirk. We know that already, but how do you think it works? Magic? Mei asked with a raised eyebrow. I honestly don't know. You're going to have to ask Izuku? We'll do plenty of that when All Might catches him. She told herself, I don't think it will be that easy. She wasn't sure if she should talk about something else. She once heard from Izuku about a place he was interested in getting materials from. He once talked about an old junkyard. Mei didn't think it was important to talk about because she thought it was probably nothing, but she kept getting the feeling that it was. A Tartarus All for One was locked up in a cell with walls, turrets, and a locked door that made it impossible to escape. He was tied to a chair. The sound he could hear was the respirator on his face, which was the only part of his body that wasn't tied down. He turned his head for a moment when he felt some strange vibrations coming from deep inside the building. The bad guy knew that something interesting was going on in this prison because these vibrations wouldn't stop. He didn't have to think for long because it looked like he had a guest. All for One said, well, this is a surprise. I didn't think we'd ever meet again. He liked to think of himself as having another proto-copyright ga copyright walk out of a hole in the wall. Izuku. When the boy took off his gray hood, he smiled and said, hello Saw. You know they really flatter you with this cell. At least they gave me a chair so I'm comfortable enough to serve my consecutive life sentences, he said. I take it you're here to get me out then, Unfortunately, I won't get far without these life support machines, unless of course you built another mask. Izuku's turn to laugh. The boy smiled and said, "Get you out." When All for One asked, "Why would I do that? Especially now that you're right where I need you to be?" He would have raised an eyebrow in surprise and then understanding. The bad guy said, "You planned this." "Teacher, don't give me too much credit," Izuku said as he walked around the cell. He stopped pacing and turned to face his old boss. "I didn't plan for this to happen. I just made plans and assumptions based on what I thought would most likely happen. I knew that Tamura's plan to kidnap a UA student would go south. If he succeeded, then I knew it would tick off the heroes and teachers. That they would zero in on the League and All Might himself would lead the charge. I also knew that with your apprentice in danger, it would force you to come out of hiding to battle the hero." Izuku stopped to think about it. "From there I expected two outcomes. 1. You defeat and kill All Might, but are so badly injured and weakened that you're taken down by another hero. Scenario 2. All Might defeats you and throws you in prison, but in turn weakens himself to the point where beating him will be easier for myself to accomplish," the green-haired teen said. All for One just stared at him with his scarred face. "Either way, I get everything I need to finish my gauntlet and 2 threats to my plans are gone." The man then started to giggle, which turned into full-on laughter. The bad guy laughed and said, "Yes, excellent, very good, making the best of every situation. I'd applaud you if my hands were free," he said as he began to calm down. "So I take it you used the space stone to enter the prison." Izuku laughed at how easy it was and said, "Piece of cake. Once inside I released a couple of dangerous prisoners from their cells, but not too dangerous that they'd have to call a hero to put them back. Then I entered the control room and ran my phantom program to render me invisible to the cameras. I'd say we have a good few minutes to talk before the guards get everything back under control." As All for One spoke, the sensors pointed to the turrets that were set up in every corner of his cell. Izuku waved his gauntlet in front of one of these sensors and said, "Find out how quirks are being used." "I'm quirkless, remember." "Not anymore," All for One said. He couldn't help but notice the metal band on the boy's left hand. That means he did it. The boy made the Infinity Gauntlet, which was not possible. The teen walked up to the bound bad guy and said, "That's why I'm here. I need more information and I'd also like a small favor, and right now you're not exactly in a position to refuse." "Information about what?" Taking another step forward, Izuku said, "About All Might's quirk." "What else do you need to know? I already told you how it worked," All for One asked. One of the boys leaned forward and asked, "Tell me about his predecessors, especially Nana Shimura." "That's more like it," the defeated bad guy said with a big grin. All Might held out a single bright yellow hair and said, "Eat this," to be exact, his hair. Mirio looked at the strand and asked, "Excuse me." The hero said, "To take my power, you need to take a piece of my DNA. This is how One for All is passed on." With I see, the third-year student seemed to know what to do. "If you said you were going to wait, why are you giving this to me now?" All Might asked with a sigh. He then turned back into his skinny self in a puff of smoke. The hero said with worry in his voice, "The truth is that I'm afraid about the future. I want to pass the power on to a successor now in case something happens to me." Mirio was excited and said, "I don't think you're going anywhere, All Might. You're too strong and important to let anyone beat you." "No one can beat you, Mirio," All Might said with a frown. He thought about the last time he saw his master alive, before All for One killed her. "I learned that lesson the hard way. I need to stop Midoriya. I have to try and make him see reason, to bring him back, but if I fail." The big blonde boy said with pride, "You won't." When he talked about his relationship with Izuku Midoriya, All Might told him, "You're the symbol of peace. I know you'll get through to that boy." Mirio Tagata knew why the hero told a fan that he wasn't a hero without a quirk, but he didn't agree with him completely. That his own quirk permeation wasn't useful or powerful for a hero until he made it that way showed that a quirk wasn't the most important thing in the job. He really felt bad for this boy who was looked down upon by his peers because he didn't have a unique trait. Nobody, not even the hero you looked up to the most, told you to give up. It couldn't have been easy. He thought that Midoriya had given up all hope and joined the bad guys because he had nothing else to offer. Still, he had to be stopped before he did too much damage. After All Might caught him, Mirio was eager to talk to Midoriya and maybe even help him get better. Toshinori held out the strand of hair again and said, "Just promise me that you will stop him if I fail." Mirio gladly took the "I promise" as an offer. After choking on the gag, he was able to swallow the hair. All Might gave him a pat on the back and said, "Good. It should work in a few hours. Nothing we can do now, but wait." While that was going on, "Now Himiko. I can't tell you how important this is to me," Izuku told the girl who was still smiling and crazy about him. "This machine is slowly processing a new stone for me. I need you to guard it with your life, and once it's finished you will call me immediately." "You can count on me, Izuku-kun," Togo told him with a smile. Dabi looked at the big round machine with open doubt and asked, "What's so important about this thing again?" Izuku told him, "My forge is a machine I made myself." He raised the gauntlet and pointed at the stones, saying, "That's how I make the stones for this. This particular version of the forge is right now processing what will be the most powerful of all the stones. The stone that will keep both the heroes and the villains in check." Dabi asked, "How so?" Izuku smiled at Himiko and said, "You'll have to wait and see." He turned on the forge and told his machine to start making the soul stone. "Remember to call me when it's done," he said. He made a portal and walked through it. Then Dabi did the same. They were back at the empty factory that Izuku had taken them to the first time. And Izuku said, "I'm glad I picked you too when I asked Tamura if I could borrow a few of his league members." He walked around his makeshift lab. "I trust you two the most," Dabi said. He just stared at him. "What do you want to achieve?" the man finally asked after getting fixed up. The other person turned around and faced Izuku. "You said you wanted to eliminate the fake heroes just like Stain wants. Was that true?" "Of course, but I want to go one step further than Stain," the teen said as he looked down at his gauntlet. And he walked over to a big thing that was covered in a white sheet and said, "I want to make a society with real heroes. Ones that aren't just judged by how powerful their quirks are, but also by their character. My Infinity Gauntlet is the key to seizing control of our world and making the new law of land." Dabi asked, "Do you really think it will be that easy?" Izuku promised as he took off the sheet to show a different version of his forge machine. "If there is one thing I've learned, it's that power rules everything. It was power that made All Might the symbol of peace, and it will be power that brings down his reign. And when these next two stones are finished I'll have so much power that no one can stop me." Dabi said, "He's obsessed." The hero he hated the most came to mind. But still, anything to put that jerk in his place, he thought. Izuku's world doesn't allow that hero to exist, which is why he came here to back up the freckled boy's plan. It might work, no matter how crazy it sounds. If you smile, Izuku will turn on the machine with the push of a button. The bad guy with dark hair asked, "So which stone is this?" Without taking his eyes off the forge, he said, "The power stone. This one will take a while too. The DNA was finicky, but with some time and data, I was able to crack it open," he said with a small laugh at how easy it was after talking with All for One. In the end, all it took was a drop of blood from someone else to show the quirk. Who knew? He could be so helpful. Otherwise Ochako put her backpack over her shoulder and walked to her next class. She had been thinking about Izuku all week. She just had so many things she wanted to know. Where did he go? Why did he do that? How long did he think about this? Was he really her friend? Why do I think about him still? That was the question she was thinking about as she walked down the hall. Ochako jumped when she heard a voice say, "Psst." When she turned around, she saw Mei Hatsume waving her over from around a corner. "Psst." Ochako walked up to her and asked, "What?" Mei grabbed the other girl's wrist and said, "Come with me." She then ran away. After a long time of dragging and being quiet, they finally ended up in one of the girls' bathrooms. "What's this about Mei?" she said out loud. "I think I know where Izuku might be hiding." Ochako quickly looked around the stalls to make sure they were the only ones there. The girl with brown hair asked, "Do you know where he is?" He mentioned this place a few times. A junkyard that he thought would be good for materials and a testing ground. "I didn't think much of it at the time, but with him disappearing I figured Izuku would be hiding there since it's pretty remote," the helper said. "Where is it?" "My friend Mei told her. Raxus Junkyard is outside the city. I was wondering if you could go there. No heroes, no police. Just to check and see if he's there." "What if he is?" Ochako asked. He wanted to see him again, but he was still a strong bad guy. Mei begged, please talk to him for me if he is there. Ask him why he's doing this. I'm sure you want to know yourself. And if possible, maybe you could even get him to consider stopping whatever he's planning. The hero student was interested and asked, why can't you go? When she saw the interested look on his face, she said, because they're watching me. As one of Izuku's known associates, the police recently interrogated me about him. They probably suspect that I might be a spy, since he's allied with the League of Villains. Ochako thought that Mei couldn't be a spy and said, that's crazy. Hatsume blurted out, I know, I've never done anything. Sure, I blew up the workshop a few dozen times, but that doesn't make me bad. The hero student asked with a worried look, did you tell them that I knew Izuku? What her parents really didn't want was for their daughter to be questioned about possibly working with a bad guy. Actually no, Mei said after a moment of thought. Ochako chewed on her bottom lip as she thought about it. Plus you have a provisional license, so if someone finds out, you won't get into a lot of trouble. Of course, Izuku wasn't at the junkyard, that's one thing. If you were there, though, it would be the perfect chance to ask him some questions, and she might be able to get him to give up peacefully. She said, okay, I'll check it out after class. Suddenly, she was hugged. She smiled and said, thanks, I owe you for this one. Uraraka gave her an awkward back hug. They looked up how to get to the junkyard and made plans together. After as Izuku smirked and moved his knight into a dangerous spot for his opponent, he said, check. Dabi scowled at him and said, this isn't fair. You're too smart for chess. Let's play something based on luck, he said, but a small alarm went off after that. Izuku laughed as he got up from the table and said, that will be the door. He told them, they're here, let's get going. He knew it was only a matter of time before the heroes found this little escape. Izuku was lucky that he had a plan for how to get away. Dabi looked at the forge, which was still working on the newest stone, and asked, how are we going to move this? It looks like he hasn't been paying attention, said the younger of the two. He used his gauntlet to open a floor portal, lift the machine, and send it through gently. After you, Dabi said, and he jumped through the open portal. Izuku followed him. Outside, the group of professional heroes looked at the empty factory and asked each other, so how do you want to do this? All Might said he wanted to go capture him alone, but he isn't here yet. Ignoring the first instructions, they went inside the building determined to catch the bad guy and take all the credit for themselves. When they got to the main floor, one of them called out, Izuku Midoriya. He tried again but got no answer. Hello. He's not here, said another hero as he looked at what looked like a factory floor workspace. Someone else saw an oil stain and some dents in the concrete. They looked around more to find clues about where Midoriya might have gone or what he was working on. Something was recently moved from here, they said. What's that? The hero asked as he cautiously approached a tall, dark silhouette in the dimly lit corner of the room. He stopped when he saw a pair of glowing red eyes flash on. Through the darkness came a large chrome robot that looked like a different prototype for the Titan. Its chest plate had the number 4 written on it. The robot growled, uh-oh, and charged at the heroes, who were shocked. While that they drove off with a from Izuku. It was a good thing he had saved another Titan prototype. Dabi was driving a big armored bank truck that the bad guy had just taken over. He said, always look before you leap. I guess they don't teach that at hero school. It was still making the next stone that would go on the boy's gauntlet in the forge that was sitting in the back of the truck. Do you want me to drive slowly or quickly? The man with dark hair asked with a smirk. When a squad of police cars came up behind them, the answer to his question was given. Aggressive, please, Izuku said as he looked back at his forge. It won't be long now. Dabi was able to get around other cars, and he would sometimes throw a blue fireball out the window to scare off the police. This chase is getting annoying, Izuku said with a sigh of frustration. He said, I'll be right back, and then disappeared in a flash. Dabi told himself, I hate it when he does that. Outside, Izuku came back and climbed back on top of the moving armored truck. He was wearing a black long coat with a hood and side slits for extra leg room. He also had on black pants, shin and knee guards, and armored boots. He walked to the edge and turned around to face the cars that were coming after him. Oh no, this street really needs repairs, he said as he waved the gauntlet around and quickly tore the pavement apart. The police cars had to hit the brakes so they wouldn't hit the broken pieces of road. "Hang on, Dobby." Izuku yelled and pointed his gloved hand in the direction they were going. The truck bounced off the road and through the air. After many miles, he parked the car in an alley between two buildings. Izuku said as he opened the back of the truck, "I didn't think they'd be that hot on our trail. He thought it would be 5 minutes before the stone was ready." Dobby said as he got out of the car, "You're the kid with the plan. What do we do now?" "Wait a minute. I need to get—" Izuku stopped when he felt the air behind him shift. He turned around just in time to see the main hero speeding toward him. He quickly thought of a plan and put out the gauntlet while activating the space and reality stone to project his epidermal barrier outward. An orange round wall stood in the way of All Might's hand just a yard from his target. They made a shockwave that was strong enough to push Dobby back when they met. All Might slid to a stop near the end of the alley as Izuku yelled, "Ha!" and pushed him away. He wouldn't let himself be thrown around like that again. It was Midoriya, and the hero looked down at the boy. Izuku smiled and pulled down his hood. "Well, aren't you a sight for sore eyes?" It was funny, but he said, "All right. Come stop the big bad Izuku Midoriya." I told him, "This is as far as you go, boy." "Why?" The hero stood with his famous smile on his face, ready for battle. "Because I am here." "Same old catchphrase," Izuku said back as he raised his infinity gauntlet. "Same old All Might." The hero was hit by a bright red glow and blown back out of the alley. "Watch the machine, and when it's done, bring me what comes out," he told his partner without looking back. Dobby told him, "I want to leave this place as soon as I can. I can help you fight almost anyone, but not the strongest hero in the world." "That makes sense," Izuku said with a nod, and he followed his opponent out of the alley. As he walked out into the empty city street, his green eyes went straight to the man who had crushed his dreams more than a year before. "So how have you been? We didn't get a chance to properly talk last time we met." When asked about what happened, Toshinori said, "You didn't exactly give me a chance to talk to you." Izuku's "sorry about that" almost sounded like a sincere answer. "I was caught up in the moment of finally obtaining superpowers." All Might finally asked the question that had been bothering him the most. "Why are you doing this? Didn't you want to be a hero?" "The boy I met said he wanted to save people with a smile," Izuku asked. He hung off the ground as he spoke. "The boy you met was Nave. He was weak and foolish." The old Izuku kept trying to reach for an impossible dream. "I'm the new Izuku. I'm better than him in every way," the powerful gauntlet said as it was pointed at the hero. All Might said, "That still doesn't answer my question." He kept the device on himself and said, "You want to know why? Fine, I'll tell you." Izuku then decided to explain himself. He said, "The awful truth is that you broke me, All Might. Everyone and everything in my life has chipped away at Maya, the doctors, the kids at school, the teachers, Bakugo, and my own mother." He named all the people who had put him down or didn't believe in him like his mother did. Every word of, "But you, All Might, you were the hammer that broke me into pieces," hurt Toshinori like a gilt dagger in the chest. As he spoke, the earth began to shake as he used the stone's power. "I had two choices then. I could either stay a broken shell of a person for the rest of my life, or I could rebuild myself and make sure what happened to me doesn't happen to anyone else again. I'll start by getting rid of you, you liar who deceives everyone and gives them false hope," the hero said. The concrete beneath his feet changed into a field of sharp spikes. All Might jumped into the air and grabbed the side of a nearby building to avoid it. He yelled, "I'm sorry, Midoriya," to try to get the kid's attention. "I truly am." Izuku yelled back, "No you're not. You're not sorry for what you said to me. You're sorry about the end result. He told me, if I didn't become a villain, would you be here apologizing to me? Did you even once think about me again after our first meeting?" All Might shrugged in shame. He really did not think about Midoriya until Naomasa brought him up as a possible suspect. Izuku pointed the gauntlet at him and said, "That's what I thought." He then pushed air into the palm, making a small vortex of wind. After that, he threw it at the blonde hero. As a response, All Might punched the air, stopping what looked like a small tornado. Getting off the building, he jumped at Midoriya and tried to grab him out of the air. Izuku saw him coming and quickly time warped away. Izuku quickly threw his gauntlet at All Might when he was a good distance away. He closed his fist with the reality stone. Pieces of cars, buildings, and concrete rushed to where the symbol of peace was and tried to crush him. All Might only had to slam his hands together hard to send the pieces flying away from him. They then landed safely on the ground. Izuku praised, "Very good, as expected from the best of the best." All Might told him, "Stop this before it gets worse." Izuku said as he looked around the city from above. It looked like no one was there. So the heroes must have gotten the people out of there. "I see, you learned your lesson from the fight with All for One," he said with a smirk. He put his left thumb on his middle finger. "That means I can loosen up a bit," he said. With the snap of a finger, the buildings around them fell apart, cars were blown away, and All Might had to cover his head with his arms so he wouldn't be hit by the shockwave. Damn! All Might turned around and saw the damage the kid had made with just a snap of his fingers. He's so powerful now, he thought. "Wow, isn't that amazing?" Izuku asked him with a smile. Who would have thought that a quirkless person that you and the rest of society dismissed as worthless could generate such power? "I never thought of you as worthless," All Might told him again, trying to talk him down. When Izuku yelled at him, he cut him off. "I was wrong. Okay. I think it's possible for you to be a hero." The teen glared at her and said, "You're lying." His fists were clenched as he spoke. "Back then, on that roof, you told me the whole truth. Weak people like me can't make a difference in this world." He screamed, "Don't you dare insult or patronize me ever again." He then ripped every fire hydrant in the city apart, controlled the water that shot out, and aimed it at the hero who was still looking down at him. "I need to fight him from afar," Izuku thought as All Might blew the water away with a single punch. "Up close, I still have no chance," he said. Then he changed the water again and threw it back at the man, but this time it turned into ice before it hit him. When Dabi said, "Once Dabi delivers the Power Stone, then it's check," the ice broke almost instantly. "And once Himiko calls me about the Soul Stone's completion." "Checkmate," he said. He knew all he had to do was wait. All Might saw that. He's fighting from a distance. When Midoriya asked, "Which means?" the hero disappeared and then reappeared in the air on his right side. "You're not good at close combat," he told Izuku as he smacked him in the palm and threw him down a street. Oomph! The boy's back hit the back of a car, stopping him. The epidermal barrier, which was a passive effect of the Space Stone, kept him safe from very serious harm. He stood up straight and shook his head. "No, okay, that hurt a bit." All Might walked down the street toward Midoriya and said, "You can't beat me." Izuku smiled and said, "You're right, I can't. At least not with 3 stones," he said as he saw Dabi sneak up on him with a round capsule in his hand. All Might also saw him and tried to grab him, but a wall of blue fire stopped him. The bad guy with black hair threw the sphere at his friend and said, "Catch." Peace symbol tried to grab it from the air, but a small portal opened up and took the capsule inside. He looked over at Midoriya, who was holding the metal container in his hand while wearing gauntlets. The boy gave him a big smirk and said, "Nice try, but not quick enough." All Might looked with worry at something that was clearly important to the young man's plans and asked, "What is that?" Izuku opened the capsule and saw a glowing emerald green stone inside. "I like to think of it as poetic justice," he said. He said, "Thank you, Dabi," as he took it in his right hand. He slowly took the stone and put it in one of the empty spaces on his infinity gauntlet. It was on the back of his palm. The outcome happened right away. As soon as the stone connected to the machine, Izuku let out a huge amount of power. "Gah!" The teen with green hair screamed as energy rushed through him. His skin had a neon green pattern that looked like veins. The power surge was so strong that it cracked the ground under his feet. Izuku let out a sigh of relief when the rush finally stopped and the veins went away. All Might asked, "What have you done now?" Izuku smiled as he took off his hooded coat to show what he was wearing underneath. "I've tipped the scales." His black sleeveless top fit him very well and showed off his lean, muscular body, which he had worked hard to get over the past year. On his right arm, he wore a black glove with no fingers that stopped mid-bicep and was made of the same material. He wore black armored boots and dark gray pants. Izuku looked like he was ready for battle all around. "I'm warning you now, Midoriya. If you don't stop being crazy and give up, I'll have to use more of my strength against you," Izuku said. Midoriya didn't answer, so Izuku walked toward his opponent. He charged at her with his palm up and said, "Don't say I didn't warn you." Then he hit her again with an open palm. His words, "Kansas. Sma," were cut off when Izuku's armored hand grabbed his incoming attack and stopped it. Because of how hard they hit each other, the wind blew around them. Dabi was shocked that Izuku could beat the strongest hero in the world. Izuku smiled and said, "Sorry, I didn't quite catch that." Green sparks started to dance along his body. "Oh, were you going to say?" He blurted out as his right fist shot forward quickly. All Might was hit in the chest with a loud smash and was thrown down the street, hitting the side of a building. Damage caused a cloud of dust to rise, but the green-haired teen quickly blew it away with a simple hand gesture. What was that?" the blonde hero asked as he coughed up blood as he pulled himself out of the hole he made in the wall. "That power. It looked a lot like his, which isn't possible. If you look closely, you can see that Izuku's right arm was broken in more than one place after that punch." He winced in pain. The young bad guy decided to explain, "Allow me to shed some light." He held up the device in his left hand. "My greatest invention, the Infinity Gauntlet. A device that takes crystallized copies of quirks taken from DNA and gives the wearer unlimited access to those quirks," he said. As he spoke, each of these stones lit up brightly. "There's the Space Stone, the Reality Stone, the Time Stone, and now the Power Stone," Izuku said with a smirk, even though his arm was still hurting. "Or you can call it by its moniker, the One for All Stone." All Might turned pale when he said that. When he realized what was going on, he said, "No," his trademark smile turned into a look of shock and horror. He laughed and said, "That's right. The power you used to pretend to be a hero is now part of my gauntlet." He just laughed at the look on All Might's face and said, "Ironic, isn't it?" Time Flex along with two others, Aizawa asked, "So how do we go about this?" The purpose of the meeting was to talk about how to defeat and capture Izuku Midoriya. There would be no classes because 2 UA teachers were getting involved. The government thought that since Midoriya was only a child, the school staff would be best because they deal with bad kids all the time. If you asked Aizawa, it seemed like the government was way too low on Midoriya. "All go in fist, by yourself," All Might said. "You two help the other heroes evacuate the surrounding area and then get into position. One day, your pride will bring you down," Aizawa told him with a tired, irritated look in his eyes. They already knew that All Might was seeing Midoriya and that was why he wanted to finish this by himself. "Even if I have to knock him out first, I'll take off the gauntlet," he swore in silence. "Should things go awry, then you use your erasure quirk." The homeroom teacher said, "We still don't know if it will work on him." There was no way to know if the boy's eraser quirk could remove the gauntlet's power since he didn't have any. Midnight said, "Then the next thing to do is my quirk. I'll put him to sleep and then we can strip him of the gauntlet." Nobody else seemed to think this would be easy, not even Aizawa. "And what if that fails?" "Then I'll take care of it," said the new voice. When they turned around, they saw a short, old man dressed in yellow. The hero Gran Torino who has retired. "With my speed I can swoop in and yank the device right off that boy's hand," he said. "You'll need to stay hidden and make a move as soon as you see that Midoriya's guard is down," he said. He called up his old teacher, and yesterday the two of them met up. Of course, the old man hit Toshinori over the head right away for making a fan sad and making him look like a bad guy. "You forget yourself, boy. I taught you, not the other way around," the old hero laughed. The meeting was cut short when All Might's phone rang. When he saw the name of his replacement, he left for a moment. He said, "Hello, young Mirio. Something's wrong, All Might." "What do you mean?" "I keep trying to activate One for All, but it isn't working." "Not working? That was a bad sign." "Yeah. It's been over 6 hours since you passed it on to me, but I don't feel any different. I even tried activating it and nothing happened." "That's strange," All Might said as he took a moment to think about what was wrong. "We'll have to figure it out later. I'm off to go bring in Midoriya, so I can't help right now." "Should I just keep trying till you get back?" "Yes. Don't worry Mirio, we'll figure this out together. Right now, Ga." Izuku screamed as he looked down at his badly hurt right arm. Even though it hurt, he laughed and said, "Ahahahaha. So much power. Feels like jet fuel coursing through my veins." "This can't be." All Might thought as he leaned against the building he had been punched in the face. Midoriya stood in the street and looked at the stone he had just bought. How can he have one for all? Izuku smiled and said, "So this is what it's like to be as strong as you." Toshinori asked, "What have you done?" "Remember that these are crystallized copies of quirks that I got from DNA," Izuku said again. "It wasn't that hard to make you bleed All Might. You're constantly spitting it out," he said darkly. When the blonde man thought about the fight with the robot at Geonosis, his eyes got even bigger. Midoriya had it sent straight to his weak spot to make him throw up a lot of blood. "That's impossible. My quirk," Izuku cut him off, "is passed down, not taken over by others." "Yes, I know all about your quirk. All for One told me everything," he said. He jerked back as he felt the broken bones in his arm move. "At first I couldn't find a single trace of a quirk in your genes, but when I added a sample of blood from a previous user, well, it suddenly came to life. Almost like it sensed a familiar person." All Might said, "All the people who used One for All in the past are long dead. There's no way you could have got some. It was Nana Shimura that made the hero stop and think." Izuku laughed at his opponent's blank face. "I know Sensei told you about her grandson Tamura Shigaraki. It was his blood that I added to awaken One for All and seal it in stone form. Tell me, All Might, do you feel weaker?" Toshinori asked. Even though he could feel the power slowly leaving him, he thought it was because he gave it to Mirio earlier that morning. "You can no longer pass this quirk on to a successor, because now it belongs to the Infinity Gauntlet. Izuku Midoriya stole the power of One for All, which is why Mirio can't use it." Even though the loss hurt him deeply, Toshinori was even more scared that the quirk was now in the hands of a bad guy. He did, however, notice something that could help him beat the boy. "You can't even handle it right," the hero said about the harm he caused himself. "You almost broke your right arm. If he could only get Midoriya to see what he was doing, he might be able to get him to stop and give him back the power." Izuku raised his Infinity Gauntlet and asked, "Did I?" The yellow stone flashed for a moment. The next thing I knew, a neon yellow shimmer covered the hurt limb and healed it almost right away. "Good as new," he told the man again when he saw the look of confusion on his face. "The time stone has an interesting power called restoration. It basically lets me fix my broken body and heal any wounds. It couldn't fix things like missing limbs or being tired, but All Might didn't need to know that. Now I can fix myself over and over again until I master the power stone. You can't beat me, you fake. I've thought of everything." All Might clenched his fists and said, "No, I won't allow this power to be abused and misused." Izuku cocked his head and asked, "Misused? Like how you misused the quirk to become a false hero celebrity who lies to the world?" "What did Toshinori say?" "I never lied. Anyone can be a hero," Izuku said with a smile that read like All Might's deep voice and laugh. He laughed at the irony of it all. "Ha ha ha. All it takes is the drive and will. Sadly, that's not the truth. According to the real you, all it takes is a powerful or useful quirk to be a hero. But if you went around preaching the truth, you wouldn't be a celebrity loved the world over, basking in attention and glory. I don't tell the truth to protect them." He looked at Izuku and asked, "From what?" "From upstaging you. Do you have any idea how furious I was when All for One told me that you used to be quirkless? The audacity you possess is astounding," he said. "You who used to be just like me, looking down on people who don't have any quirks," the boy said. The boy's eyes turned emerald steel. He looked down at the gauntlet on his hand and scowled furiously. "You taught me the truth of this world, All Might. That if a quirkless loser like you could do so much, then why couldn't I do the same? Except I didn't have Nana Shimura to feel sorry for me like you did," he said. As he looked at himself in the metal, he said, "I had to make my own power. I put all my hopes, dreams, and desires into this. I've come too far to be stopped now. I'll change this world for the better. No more relying on lies and false heroes like you All Might. Only real heroes will be allowed to continue in my world." "And what will you do to those that don't meet your standards?" All Might asked. Izuku replied with a smile. He replied, "They will stop existing. All will be made right." She said, "I'm sorry, Midoriya." The hero felt bad and looked down. He looked at the boy he had turned into a crazy, powerful bad guy and said, "I'm sorry I made you so twisted, but I promise." Izuku frowned and said, I will bring you back, even if I have to hit you in the head with it. He said, easier said than done, and then his face lit up with a smirk again. Talking about moving things around, the Power Stone should also be able to boost the other stone's strength and range when used together, he said. The red and green stones lit up as he spoke. Let's test it out. He spoke as he flattened his left hand and quickly chopped up. In an instant, the street between them was cut in half, and it kept going until it reached the building All Might was standing next to and cut it in half, too. Izuku laughed and asked, how do you like that? Dabi walked up to him and said, if you're done showing off. He was reminding him that he was still there. I'd like to leave now. Izuku made a portal behind his friend and said, okay if you don't want to stay and watch the show. He waved Dabi away and said, say hello to Tamura for me. Dabi quickly ran away before things got worse. He really wanted to watch, but he didn't want to get caught between two gods' weapons. Before All Might could try to grab him again, Izuku shut the portal and Flash warped away at the same time. Missed. Be careful, Midoriya. All Might yelled after him. I'll stop holding back if you don't surrender. Izuku smiled at him and said, please do. I want to see how powerful my Infinity Gauntlet really is, so give it your all. Beat me, crush me, and tear me apart. He used his thumbs to lift his cheeks and make the ends of his lips stick out further. Do it with a smile. He. Like the great hero you are. At the same time, at Raxius' junkyard, Ochako walked up to the scrapyard's outer gate. Something about the sign made it look like no one had been here in a long time. The girl came dressed as a superhero and carrying her new staff as a weapon in case it was needed. She used her oddity to float over the old, rusty gate. She saw a big, run-down building with smokestacks that had probably been used to melt down the junk in the past as she looked around the huge, empty space full of broken cars, boats, planes, appliances, and even some old robots. If Izuku was hiding here, this is the best spot to begin your search. She said to herself, okay, let's take a look. She sneaked around the piles of metal and scrap in the dark. Ochako didn't use the door to look inside. Instead, he floated up to one of the broken windows. At first, she didn't see anyone until she heard a noise. Looking deeper into the empty building, she saw a strange machine that didn't belong in the condemned building. The lights and drumming sound it was making also made it look like it was moving. She quietly crept inside after getting down to the ground and looking for Izuku. Uraraka couldn't find him, so she went to check out the machine. Before she could even look at it, Ochako felt a huge urge to kill something from behind. She jumped out of the way of a combat knife out of the blue. As she turned around, she saw who was attacking her. Himiko Toga smiled big and said, as good as ever. You. Ochako knew who she was right away. The girl who beat her up at the training camp. The girl laughed and said, I don't think we've been properly introduced. My name is Ochako Uraraka and I'm going to be dating Himiko Izuku, she said. Her smile turned into a mean frown. The girl that Izuku was so interested in. Ochako asked, where is he? She pulled out a matching dagger for her other hand and said, so you can steal him from me? I don't think so. Izuku told me to watch over the machine and deal with thieves however I see fit, she said with a demonic grin. Sorry about that. The hero student yelled as she pulled out her staff and got ready to fight. Ochako glared at her and said, we'll see about that. Getting back to city, all of them stood there and stared up at the cars and building pieces that were floating in the air. Midoriya was hidden in the floating junk. He would throw a random object at the hero every few seconds and then flash warp away to hide where he was. The truth was that Izuku still didn't fully understand the Power Stone, so he was being a little careful now. His body would get hurt every time he tried to use it. The Time Stone made it easy for him to fix, but Izuku wanted to learn how to use one for all properly in the long run. And All Might let out a frustrated sigh. This isn't going anywhere. So be it, the hero said, and he jumped into the middle of the floating field of debris very quickly. It was all gone in an instant, and All Might had Midoriya by his right arm. Grass and his super strength worked together to pull the boy back down to the ground. AHG. Izuku's back hit the ground hard, hurting him. All Might tried to take off the Infinity Gauntlet on the left while his right arm was being held captive. Izuku quickly thought of something and bent his index finger and thumb, then flicked it at him. Normally, that kind of thing would only hurt bugs, but the boy had the Power Stone on him. The flick that came out of it was now strong enough to blow All Might right off of him. With a skid, Toshinori said, that seemed almost desperate. That's true about you too, Izuku replied as he put his broken finger back together. As he got back up, he smiled at the hero. Are you perhaps reaching the end of your time limit? All Might complained that smart kids have to remember everything. Of course you remember that, he said. Well, I used to be your biggest fan, Izuku told him. He told him, you know you still have a chance to be a hero. All you have to do is take off that gauntlet and give up. You can stop all of this, Midoriya. Izuku replied with a laugh that slowly turned into hysterical laughter. Take off my infinity gauntlet, the boy with green hair asked as he walked slowly toward the hero. And give up your quirks and stop being useful, Deku? He asked, cocking his right fist back as green sparks danced across his arm. Mars! Smash! With one punch, the buildings around them fell down, and the street they were fighting on was forever changed. Izuku looked down at his arm and said, wow, it looked like the damage from the Power Stone was worse than the first time he used it. 30% is different from 60%, they said. After quickly getting better with the Time Stone, he smiled and turned to All Might. The peace symbol looked a little worn out. His costume was torn in a few places, and he had cuts all over his body. All Might gasped, having taken the full force of that last attack. You look like you're having fun. Fun? Izuku asked with a raised eyebrow. Fun isn't something you think about when you're trying to make the world a better place, Izuku said with a smirk as he raised his fist. But this does put a smile on my face. Hero number 1 yelled at him. Look around you, Midoriya. Look at all this destruction you're causing. Do you really believe this will lead to a better world? He also took a look around and said, I know it will. He saw that he had damaged the city too much. Don't worry about this mess, I can pick up my toys better than you can, she said, pointing the gauntlet into the air. The green Power Stone, the red Reality Stone, and the yellow Time Stone all started to glow brightly together. He clenched his fist and sent out a burst of yellow and red energy that hit everything in the area. The rocks and concrete started to move slowly at first. It's getting faster and faster to rebuild. All Might looked on in creepy interest as the streets and buildings were quickly put back together. All the damage they did in battle was fixed in an instant, and they were standing in the middle of a city that was brand new. See? How? The Time Stone does more than just heal my body, Izuku said as a trail of blood came out of his nose. He wiped off the blood and looked at it for a moment. I can also use restoration to fix any damage done to non-living things, and if I combine it with the power and reality stones, an entire city block is child's play, he said. I should remember not to do something that big again until I've done it more times. This power seemed to hurt his body a little when he used it too much. At least for now. Now where were we? Izuku asked as he sped up to get close to All Might and raised his right fist. In response, the hero slammed his fist into the boy's attack, blocking it. It did that and beat it, throwing Midoriya back so hard that his back hit the side of a truck. Izuku wiped the blood and saliva off his chin and said, that's more like it. He then sped forward through the air. He reached out and used the reality stone to rip some metal from a nearby building. He then made a big sword out of the metal and tried to stab the number 1 hero with it. All Might grabbed the blade with all his strength and broke it. Another time, he tried to hit Midoriya with his other hand, but a small opening between them let his arm go through. Izuku smiled and shut the door, trying to cut him up like he did with Muscular. All Might saw what he was going to do and pulled his limb out at the last second. With the other hand, he threw the kid away behind his back. Teenage boy with green hair fell and hit his head on the sidewalk before stopping. Izuku laughed as he got up from the ground and said, You're starting to take me seriously. With a happy smile, he wiped his pants clean. He looked at the man's slowly lost muscles and asked, Is it too late? You lost a few centimeters of bulk there anyway. All Might saw that he was right when he said, Nothing gets past you, I see. He was getting close to his limit. Toshinori tried to end the fight many times, but his guilt and the fact that he was fighting a boy the same age as his students kept coming back to haunt him. This made him quietly pull his punches. He had to give it his all, even if it was only for a moment, since time was running out. I've studied heroes for years. I know their quirks, tricks, plans, and habits, Izuku told him, pointing at him. She sighed and said, There's nothing you can do to stop me. I've planned this all out too well. It looks like it was pointless to try to convince Izuku to quit. Forgive me for this, Midoriya. Wah? All Might was there before he could blink. Izuku hit the hero with the reality stone, but the hero was stronger than its telekinetic power and grabbed his right arm. After putting Midoriya over his shoulder, he turned and hit the kid over the head with the other hand, which was so hard it almost broke the ground. His body was getting smaller quickly, but he was still holding the boy's face up by his arm. Toshinori finally let out the breath he had been holding when the fight was over. Was that it? He asked, his eyes getting bigger as the young bad guy spoke. Izuku hit the man with an uppercut, which made him let go of his arm. No, that's not even close to good enough. Well, it looks like you've used up all your power, All Might, the hero said. He had lost all of his strength and was back to being skinny and weak. He was about to say, unfortunately for you, I am not bound by such limitations, but the sound of the news helicopter coming closer cut him off. Oh, I was wondering when they would get brave enough for a closer look. Toshinori looked at him at the helicopter and asked, You knew they were here? Of course. Who do you think told them anonymously that All Might would be fighting a bad guy in the city? Izuku was making sure everything went as planned. Now that One for All had been taken, all Izuku had to do was figure out when the hero would lose all of his power. Based on the familiar look of the thin man, it looks like he found it. Don't you think it's time all your adoring fans get a good look at the real you? Toshinori looked away. Izuku just smiled and said, You wouldn't. I'll be right back, he said. Behind him, a portal the size of a person opened, and he stepped back into it. Front of the helicopter. It looks like the buildings that were destroyed have miraculously been put back together again, the reporter said while keeping the camera on the fight. He pointed down to the battle and said, Look. A flash of blue light appeared in the back of the copter and said, The bad guy that All Might is fighting seems to have disappeared. They were shocked to see Izuku Midoriya sitting in the back seat when they turned around. He said, Hi, and took 3 of the extra cameras. Letting these go, Izuku said as the flash moved away. Getting back to the fight, miss me? Izuku asked when he came back with 3 video cameras. He levitated these things around him with the gauntlet. All Might looked ashamed of what he was about to do and said, Don't do this. While the man begged, Izuku waved to one of the cameras and said, Hello everyone. My name is Izuku Midoriya, and this is, he said, pointing at the hero. He gave the hero a dark smirk and said, As All Might. The real All Might. Yes, people. This skinny matchstick man is the world's greatest hero. This is your peace sign. Izuku was having a great time with this. Killing All Might wasn't the best way to get back at him. That's not right, that's too easy. This was the best way to get back at him. Show him to everyone and make all of his lies public. Did you know that All Might and I have something in common? Don't. Toshinori yelled when he realized what he was about to say. Izuku said, He and I are both quirkless. All this time, he was borrowing a quirk that didn't belong to him. But his body has become too weak to fully use it. The bad guy he fought in Kamino Ward should have retired him, but he still clings to his title and power like an old dying king clings to his throne. He paused to get a better look at the skinny man. I ask you, all of you who don't have a quirk or have one that doesn't work, is this your pillar of justice? Do you accept this fraud, this lie, as your symbol of peace? All Might looked down in shame and humiliation, while Izuku just smiled. Everything he hid and covered up for years so that people could have someone to look up to and feel hopeful about was now out in the open. Shown by a boy whose hope he had dashed. Still, though. There were more cameras around. All right, then. Do you have anything to say for yourself? Anything to say about your lies and deceit? The hero stood there still for a moment and then mumbled something. Speak up, your people can't hear. I said. Toshinori was able to put together the last of his strength to get bigger again. Everything will be okay. He wasn't going to hide in shame like this. He would stop this threat at the very least before he retired and had to face the world's judgment. Izuku frowned when he saw the man's new smile and confidence, even though he knew he was being watched. As Midoriya flicked his wrist, he said, A liar to the very end, huh? He held out the gauntlet to the hero. He was about to give him a full blast of the reality and power stone when carbon fiber bandages wrapped around his device and pulled him back down to earth. I'm so disappointed in you, he said. Shota Aizawa glared at the boy and said, That's enough. He held his capture weapon tightly and used his erasure quirk. Izuku yelled, "What?" as he felt like all of his power went away. He kept his eyes on Midoriya and said, "That was easier than I thought it would be." He then stretched out more of his scarf to trap him. The underground hero was knocked off his feet by Izuku's telekinetic blast. Just kidding, huh? He almost crashed through a building, but All Might caught him in time. "Yeah, I don't mean to brag, but your quirk erasure doesn't work on someone like me who doesn't have any quirks in their genes," he said as he ran his hand through his messy dark green hair. He praised them for trying and said, "Nice try though." A whip caught his right arm before he could gloat any longer. Midnight grabbed him and said, "Hey, cutie." She tried to use her quirk to knock him out with her mist. "Mind falling asleep for me?" Izuku just gave her a crazy grin. "Sorry, but I'm not into older women," he said, flicking his fingers with just the right amount of one for all to clear her mist. He then grabbed her whip and threw Midnight down the street. He turned his attention back to All Might and Aizawa and pointed his gauntlet at them. Behind them, the surface of the building broke apart, and the pieces formed a huge hand that went around them. All Might jumped out of the way while holding on to Erasure Head and landed safely next to a fully healed Midnight. It was too bad that it took away the last bit of strength he had just gained. Midnight asked, "He doesn't mess around, does he? So what's plan D?" Aizawa asked as Toshinori shrunk back down to his skinny self. The peace sign coughed and asked, "Is he in place? I'm afraid I won't be much help for the rest of this fight." Izuku called out, "What are you three planning over there?" The boy smiled as he flowed back up into the air. "Not going to say that, huh? That's okay. I'll come to you." Izuku flashed to where they were and appeared directly above them with his fist raised. He said, "Run," and shook the city with his huge arm. Raxus garbage lot. Hia. Ochako hit Himiko in the face with her staff and threw her away. Toga glared at her and wiped the blood from her mouth. "This isn't fair. I'm the one who's supposed to make you bleed." She jumped back up and ran at the student, knife ready to strike. Ochako did everything she knew how to do to stay safe from getting stabbed. Hatsume made her a new staff based on Izuku's design. She hadn't used it enough yet, but it seemed to fit her quirk and the way she fights well. The girl said, "I need to end this quickly," and then she used the grapple claw to grab a nearby crate that she had made float earlier. Now that it didn't have any weight, she could easily pull it toward her and flail it around. Toga had to avoid the attack and take a few steps back. By turning the staff over, she was able to get behind Uraraka and get her blade close enough to hit her in the neck. Ochako couldn't dodge or block, so she closed her eyes and got ready for the worst. She was never stabbed by the knife. The girl who was psychotic was instead frozen in a small glacier by a wave of ice that came out of nowhere. A calm male voice said, "We made it in time." Uraraka turned around when she heard the voice of the person who saved her. Shoto Todoroki, Momo Yaoyorozu, Eijiro Kirishima, Tenya Iida, and Tsuyu Asui, some of her classmates, were waiting at the front door of the building. They were all fully dressed as heroes. Kishisama asked with a smirk, "Hey, what did we miss?" "What are you guys doing here?" Ochako asked, becoming tense at being caught. Iida gave her an angry look and said, "We could ask you the same question." Momo told her, "I saw you sneaking out of the dorm in your costume." When Ochako said, "So I asked them to help me follow you," he looked ashamed. "Mind explaining yourself here?" She blushed and said, I wanted to find Izuku Midoriya. I needed to speak with him." As Tsuyu spoke out, "You're not still in love with him, are you?" She said, "No, of course not," a little too quickly, and her face got even redder. "I just had some questions and I wanted to see if I could talk him out of whatever he's planning." Todoroki scolded them, "If you knew where he was hiding, you should have told the teachers." But before they could finish talking, the machine behind them exploded loudly from the inside. A round metal capsule was thrown out when the sparks stopped. It landed next to Momo, who picked it up with an odd look on her face. When she saw that it could be opened, she slowly turned it over to see what was inside. A little black stone that has a purple glow around it. She looked around at everyone and asked, "What is this?" "I don't know, but I think I know someone who might know," Ochako said as she looked at Himiko's frozen body. Katsuki Bakugo was shocked as she looked at the TV. There had been live news from the scene for an hour. All Might had been fighting a bad guy, And not just any bad guy. There was that nerdy jerk Deku battling the main hero and managing to stay alive. Something that Bakugo couldn't do when he and Kirishima failed to beat All Might in the battle examined before. He didn't think Deku could beat the world's greatest hero, not even with that fancy gauntlet. He clenched his fists in anger and said, "That jerk." He became so angry that he stopped moving when he saw All Might shrink down to a thin, weak-looking man. The world found out the truth about the hero when Bakugo saw Deku steal some cameras and go on a rant. That's right, people. This skinny matchstick man is actually the greatest hero in the world. This is your symbol of peace. What the heck was going on? What made All Might look so weak? How come he wasn't beating Deku? What's more, how did Deku know about this form that was weaker? Did you know that All Might and I have something in common? He and I are both quirkless. This whole time he was borrowing a quirk that never belonged to him. However, his body has grown too weak to fully use it. The villain he fought in Kamino Ward should have retired him, but he still clings to his title and power like an old dying king clings to his throne. I ask you, all of you that are quirkless or have an impractical quirk, is this your pillar of justice? Do you accept this fraud, this lie as your symbol of peace? Is this my fault? Katsuki thought back to the fight between All Might and the weirdo with the mask. He didn't see the whole fight because some of his classmates helped him get away. He only knew that something big happened and that All Might was under more pressure than ever. If what Deku said about the strongest hero getting weaker was true, then it was probably his fault that those bad guys caught him. No matter how he looked at it, Katsuki felt bad about what he did. If he was stronger, they wouldn't have taken him so easily. He felt so sorry for that jerk Apotheosis, who he now knew was really Deku. It didn't make sense at all. Katsuki wasn't strong, but Deku was. How did things go so wrong? His phone rang in his pocket before he could say anything else. Upon closer inspection, he saw Kirishima's name along with a message. Katsuki was sure of herself after reading. There must be a way for him to fix this. The city. This is getting worse and worse, Aizawa said. At the moment, they had to avoid a big, long dragon made of concrete, metal pieces, and glass shards. And Midoriya was controlling it like a puppet. He made it out of pieces of the buildings around him. Toshinori ducked behind a flipping car and said, "Tell me about it." He lost so much strength that he couldn't even fight back, so he had to defend himself. Aizawa said, "We need to get him on the ground and fight him close up." Midoriya stayed far away and kept them at bay. To make room for Gran Torino to grab the gauntlet, they had to move the boy to a better spot. "That's crazy," Toshinori said. He had already told Midoriya about his new power stone, the quirk it gave him, and what he had learned about the other stones. Eraserhead asked, "That super strength hurts his body, right? In the time between the damaging and healing himself, we might be able to beat him. Any ideas on how we can do that?" Midnight asked as she jumped behind the car they were hiding behind after failing to attack Izuku. Without being able to see his opponents, Midoriya yelled, come out wherever you are." He flew a little higher and looked around at all the damage to see if he could find them. He smiled when he saw a head of blonde hair. "Got you," he yelled, and his dragon made of building materials crashed into them head first. He told his fellow teachers, "Watch out," just in time because he saw the attack coming. With a flick of his wrist, Izuku blew the dust cloud away from where the rocks had hit. Running scared All Might, Izuku laughed when he saw that they got away. He said it in a sarcastic way. How very heroic. He teased the man. A hero must be willing to put his life on the line. Making fun of what the man had said. "You're nothing without your power." Nothing. Izuku hit the ground softly to look for them since that didn't get him to come out. He began picking up and throwing away cars with the gauntlet. When he got to a broken down, empty bus, he used the power stone to move it out of the way. "When will you get it through your head, All Might? You are what's wrong with the world," he continued as he put his broken leg back together. "You set an impossible standard that no one can reach, not even you." Izuku frowned as he picked up more debris with the reality stone and couldn't find his target anywhere. "You're not even real. Yet you look down on the weak and won't even give us a chance to be strong." With the snap of his finger, he almost tore down the buildings around him again, but he decided against it because he didn't want to show off his power that way again. Izuku called out, "All Might, face me," he yelled, looking around with a frown. At the moment, All Might, Erase Your Head, and Midnight were hidden on the bottom floor of a nearby building. "He wants me," Toshinori said, getting ready to go outside. But Aizawa's scarf wrapped around his wrist stopped him. The man with dark hair pulled him back and asked, "Are you just going to let him kill you? What good will that do?" The thin blonde man turned away and said, "I don't think he wants to kill me. Midoriya wants to see me beaten and humiliated. Maybe when he finally gets what he wants he'll be satisfied and stop." Someone glared at him and said, "And how will that look to the world? The great All Might, the symbol of peace, gives up. Is that how you want to go out?" "Not at all. No, that wasn't how Yagi planned to leave this world of good guys and bad guys." "Then what do you suggest? He's too powerful to stop with force." Aizawa brushed his hair to the side, showing that he had a communicator on his ear. "We still have Plan D." When he pressed it, he got in touch with the fourth hero working on this mission. Outside, Izuku yelled again, "All Might," for the hero to come face him. He wasn't sure if what he had done was enough. Izuku had already shown that the number one hero was a fake. That was pretty much a win for him. He thought about going to the junkyard, where his soul stone should be almost done. The man in question showed up in the middle of the street before he could make up his mind. Toshinori looked at the young bad guy and said, "You want me? Here I am." Izuku walked over to him and said, "It's about time. So All Might, ready to face your ultimate defeat?" The man pointed to his real body and said, "It will be a hollow victory for you." "It doesn't matter. I won," Izuku said with a smirk and his arms spread wide. "No matter how you look at it, it's my victory. I spent so much time planning and researching just to get to this point where I tell the world the truth about you." He laughed as he kept a close eye on the hero in case he tried to trick him. "Society will now lose all hope and faith not just in you, but all heroes." When Toshinori asked the boy, "Was that your plan? To dash everyone's hopes just because I dashed yours?" he was shocked. On the other hand, he met bad guys whose reasons were much more childish. He frowned when he saw that Toshinori wasn't getting the bigger picture. "Don't worry, I'll give them their hope back when I build a new society based on heroes. I'm not a monster." The weak man tried to beg the kid again, "Just leave. You got what you wanted with those other stones and one for all." The man was given his device and told, "Not until I prove something. I have to know for sure." The weak hero asked, "Know what?" As Izuku said, "I need to know if quirks are really as great as everyone says they are." For a moment, his eyes became sad. "I need to know if I could have been a hero without one," he said. He didn't believe what other people said about him. They were wrong. If he could beat the best, he wouldn't be so useless after all. Toshinori told the boy again, "I'm sorry," for what he had said months before. Izuku yelled, "Oh, please stop saying that," as he lifted the gauntlet high into the air to try to hit the hero with a lot of power. But as soon as he did, All Might quickly made a sign with his hands behind his back. Aizawa, who was paying close attention, saw the signal and spoke into the communicator. Now, Gran Torino ran out of his hiding place like a jet as soon as he said it. He flew as fast as he could and caught up to Midoriya behind him, ready to grab the gauntlet and pull it off. Izuku could see the old man coming up behind him in the reflection of his metal device out of the corner of his eye. He could not think straight, so everything slowed down for him. He couldn't turn around and fight back because that would leave him open, but he could do one other thing. Izuku used the time stone in an instant, and the whole area was surrounded by a yellow bubble. Everything inside the bubble was frozen in time except for the person who cast it. "You." Izuku turned around and looked at the old retired hero with angry green eyes. The old hero was close enough to touch Izuku's infinity gauntlet. Even though time had stopped for a moment, sneaky old man cut the small man in the stomach with a small piece of the power stone. As the bubble broke up, time went back to normal. Guh! Gran Torino let out a painful gasp as the blow hit him hard. Izuku Flash came up behind him and grabbed his cape. He was held up in the air. "You may be fast, old man, but as long as I can stop time it doesn't matter how fast you are," Izuku said. "What just happened?" Midnight and Aizawa asked each other. A flash of yellow, and Gran Torino was on the ground in pain just as he was about to win for them. All Might remembered something similar happening at the event where Midoriya showed up with his weapon and said, "It's just like before." With the gauntlet raised, He pointed to the yellow stone below his wrist and said, "Since you're all a little slow on the upkeep, I'll explain it." He said, "The time stone lets me stop time in a remote area. I was saving it for an emergency, mostly because he wouldn't be able to use it again for a while because it needed to cool down. Congratulations on making me use it." He shook Gran Torino off of All Might with a small piece of the power stone. "He may be fast, but as long as I can stop time, it doesn't matter how fast he is." Whoa! Toshinori caught his old teacher, but the impact made him fall back a bit. Izuku rose off the ground again and said, "Let's see." Of course, the first thing that came to mind was All Might's attempt to beat me up and take my Infinity Gauntlet by force, he said as he went off on a tangent. His mouth kept mumbling. Next was to get Erasure Head to disable me and Midnight to knock me out, as he kept trying to beat them but failing. "I'll assume your last resort was the old man and his speed." "Now you answer my question," Izuku said, pointing his fist at them through his gauntlets. "What else do you got?" "Raxus garbage lot. So these stones power his gauntlet?" Momo asked as she took a hold of the purple-black gem that was glowing. Tuga growled at them. "And he needs this last one to finish it, is that right?" She only unfroze her head so they could question her. "And he'll be here soon to get it." At first, she wouldn't talk, but by playing on her love for Izuku Midoriya, they were able to get her to reveal some important information. The crazy girl finally blurted out some secrets she wasn't supposed to share with anyone. Tenya said, "It looks like he calls this one the Soul Stone. What does it do?" She bit her lip and glared at him. "How should I know?" "That's right. Izuku only told her it was very important and not what it did." Kirishima put his phone away quietly so they wouldn't notice and said, "I think we're missing the important thing here, guys. We have this stone and Midoriya doesn't know we have it." "That's right. Let's tell the police," Momo said with a nod. "Even if they can't figure out what it does, they might be able to keep it out of his hands." Kirishima got off track and said, "Or, hear me out. What if we used it against him?" Suyu asked straight out, "Has he gone crazy?" She asked, "Use how?" Momo asked. Tenya yelled, "You're not really thinking about this. If this stone is the strongest, maybe its power can trump the others and defeat Midoriya when he arrives," Todoroki said. "Is that what you're getting at?" Ochako was thinking as she looked off into space. Tenya turned to her and said, "I can't believe I'm hearing this. What about you, Uraraka?" She turned to face them and said, "I think." She really did want to talk to Izuku, so she said, "We should stay here and stop him." Now that she had help, if things went badly, they could beat him together. Momo looked at the stone in her hand and said, "From what I've seen, Izuku Midoriya was one step ahead of the heroes. But now we're ahead of him." Todoroki seemed to agree with this plan as well, saying, "We can catch him off guard." Kirishima said with a smile, "That's the spirit. Who else is in?" "I think this is a bad idea, but leaving you to fight him on your own would be even worse," Suyu said. Suyu reluctantly agreed to stay and help. It didn't make her happy, but the more people they had against Midoriya, the better. Iida, the class representative, was the only one left to persuade. All of them turned to look at him, as if they were waiting for him to say something. Tenya glared at them and said, "This is crazy." Then his eyes got nicer. "But I've done crazier things on my own," she said. "Like killing the hero by myself." As soon as everyone agreed, they went outside and began to think of ways to fight Midoriya when he showed up. Himiko was frozen from the neck down when she said, "Hey." The group didn't pay attention to her and left the girl there until they decided what to do with her. Going back to city, a big cloud of broken glass and dust swirled and turned around above the middle of the damaged street. Izuku stayed in the middle of everything and moved his arms around like a conductor on stage, controlling the vortex. It was getting cloudy, and Aizawa yelled, "How are we supposed to get to him?" as he dodged a branch of broken glass. Toshinori called out, "I have an idea," as he dove. He still had some one-on-one left in him, so he said, "Get him on the ground in an open spot, and I'll take care of the rest." It only had to be turned on at the right time to deal a killing blow. They were lucky that Midoriya was smart enough to fight them from afar. Every minute, he got better at using the gauntlet and stronger. They only had a short time to stop him before it was too late. "I'm going in." Gran Torino yelled into the cloud of dust and glass. When Izuku saw him coming, he just smiled and threw waves of shards at the old hero. The man quickly steered clear of each attack until he got to the middle and tried to kick the boy in the head. Nice try, Izuku said as he blocked his foot with his gauntlet and blasted Torino backwards. But while he wasn't looking, Eraserhead's scarf and Midnight's whip wrapped around his legs and began pulling him to the ground. 1, 2, 3. Pull. They both pulled him down with all their strength. The teen with green hair was briefly caught off guard by how determined they were. He gasped when his back hit the ground, which knocked him out. All right, that's it, Izuku yelled as he jumped back up, but Gran Torino quickly kicked him off. It looked like they were putting pressure on Midoriya and not letting him fight back. Enough. He blew away everything around him with the reality stone, making the heroes run away. Putting out his gauntlet-covered fist and saying, "I'm ending this now. I thought there were 4 of them. Hold the phone." Where is All Might? When he felt someone right behind him, he realized what was going on. Izuku turned around and used his device to blast the hero. A big, strong hand grabbed the gauntlet by the wrist as soon as he turned. While his strength came back for a short time, All Might held on tight. He knew this was his only chance. "I'm sorry, Midoriya," he said as he cocked his other arm back and got ready to kill Midoriya with one blow. Texas. Smash. Izuku yelled as he saw the first one coming straight at him. Since someone was touching him, the time stone wouldn't help him because it wouldn't freeze time for that person. Midoriya was hit hard, and he crashed through the street, kicking up pieces of concrete as he skipped across the ground. He landed in a cloud of dust and debris, having lost and probably being broken. There was complete silence as everyone held their breath, waiting for the young bad guy to stand up again. When he didn't, everyone let out a sigh of relief. Aizawa said, "That seemed like a bit of an overkill." Izuku Midoriya was still a kid, even though he was a bad guy. Toshinori was very short of breath as he shrunk back down to his skinny form. Gran Torino said, "At least it's over," as he went to find the kid's crash site. Even though he didn't find him, he did see the gauntlet sticking out of some broken things. The force of that blow must have knocked it off the boy's hand. The old man walked over to get the gun as he walked toward it, but he stopped when he saw something. The fingers were moving all the time. When the red stone lit up with a scary light, the metal hand clenched its grip. A cloud of dust rose into the air, revealing Izuku, who was lying in a crater hurt and bleeding. Izuku grunted as he threw away the things that were covering him. He stood with his legs shaking as blood ran down his face. "I thought it was impossible that this kid could take a punch from Yagi and still be awake." Toshinori was shocked too as he saw Midoriya have a hard time standing up. His black top without sleeves was now torn and full of holes. "Gah!" Izuku gasped in pain as he thought about all the hurt parts of his body that punched him. Even though the power stone was used at the last second to boost his epidermal barrier, he still took a lot of damage. A broken arm, leg, pelvis, 3 broken ribs, and a head injury. He started to heal himself with the time stone. It was quickly fixed, but the dirt and dried blood spots that he had said, "That really hurt All Might," stayed. He put his fingers together and said, "Unfortunately for you, it wasn't enough." All the stones on his gauntlet started to glow as he said this. The heroes stopped moving because they knew he was getting ready for another one of those devastating finger snaps. Izuku stopped Toshinori from arguing. "Do you know why you failed today, All Might? Because deep down you still won't take me seriously. Had you put your all into that punch, then I wouldn't have been able to get back up." "Do you know how rude that is to me?" Izuku asked him with a mean look. He flash-warped past Gran Torino in an instant and appeared in front of a shocked All Might. He punched him hard in the weak spot with his right hand, but it wasn't as strong as the Power Stone. Toshinori rolled over and threw up more blood. He also said, "I think I've seen enough." He thought Himiko should have called him by now but hadn't. She must have forgotten, or something must have happened to her. Izuku had to get to the junkyard no matter what. He turned around and left the heroes behind as a portal opened behind him. "I hope to see some of you in the new world. Farewell." "Did we just lose?" Aizawa asked as Toshinori coughed himself out behind them and fell to his knees. "In more than one way," Gran Torino said with sadness. After he stopped coughing, Toshinori finally said, "I think it's much worse than we think." Going back to what Midoriya said, he saw that the boy was right. Some part of him must have held back in his mind before he punched. It was the kid's eyes. For a moment, they were wide-eyed and scared. Toshinori thought of the first time he met Izuku. He was scared and asked him if he could be a hero without having a quirk. When that memory came back to him, he held back some of his power for a moment. He let out a single tear of sadness for the old Midoriya, who he was beginning to believe had died a long time ago. Izuku looked at the broken forge where his last stone was made. He then turned around and saw Himiko standing there with her neck frozen in ice. Nobody had to be smart to figure out what happened. "Hi," she said with a blush of shame. "Where's the soul stone?" She should have told him, but he wanted her to. "Keep it simple, please." Okay, first that gravity girl showed up, then her friends showed up, then they took the stone and well, here we are. She said nervously. "Please don't be mad." "Why would I be mad?" Izuku asked with a smile, even though he was in a bad situation. He sighed and said, "I don't blame you. I blame myself. I didn't think anyone, let alone a group of UA students, would find this place. How did Uraraka learn about it? It doesn't matter, they won't get very far." She looked at him and said, "If you get me out of this ice, I'll help you get your stone back, Izuku-kun." Izuku told her, "No, I think you've done enough," and then he closed the portal behind her. Himiko told him, Wait, I'm still frozen." As she closed the door, the girl with green hair said, "Ask Dabi to thaw you out." His next move was to open a new portal that led him out of the old, abandoned smelting plant and into the junkyard. He began walking around once he was outside. Shoto Todoroki was sitting on an old car when Izuku walked right by him. He thought, "I wonder how far they got." He stopped and stepped back a few steps. Then he slowly turned his head to look at the student sitting there without saying anything. "Izuku Midoriya, you're a little shorter in real life," Todoroki said. Izuku just smiled. The line, "Shoto Todoroki, son of the number 2 hero Endeavor. Quirk, ice and fire," was just perfect. "Do you mind if I sit down? I've been on my feet all day and could really use a break." Shoto gave him a nod and said, "Go ahead." He then carefully looked at his opponent. Midoriya's black sleeveless top was torn and ragged, and so was the black fingerless glove on his right arm. His hair was tangled, or maybe that was just how it was supposed to look. His face and clothes were covered in blood, but he didn't look like he had any wounds. Then he looked at the gauntlet on Midoriya's left arm. Yaoyorozu knew how to get that thing off of him. The first part was for Todoroki to sit here and keep him busy while everyone else got ready. Saying, "Thank you," and waving the gauntlet, Izuku gathered some broken objects from around the yard and made himself a simple chair. He then sat down on it and turned to face the UA student sitting next to him. "Let me guess what the plan is here," Todoroki asked, startled. He was wondering if the bad guy knew what they were up to but had kept his composure. "Your friends took my soul stone and you stayed behind since you're the strongest of them to keep me busy while they get away. Is that the gist of it?" The boy with two-toned hair said, "Maybe." He didn't say yes or no to his theory. "You called it the soul stone. What does that mean and what does it do?" "Wow, that's cool," Izuku said with a smirk. "Something I used to think was impossible." He didn't say anything else, so they were quiet for more than a minute. To keep the other person talking, Todoroki decided to ask, "Why are you doing this?" Izuku crossed his legs and put his hands on his knee and said, "How about this? I'll answer your question if you promise to answer some of mine." "That makes sense," Todoroki said. He then looked away to see if Momo was ready to give the signal yet. "As you probably know, I don't have any quirks," Izuku began his story. "In my entire short life I looked up to heroes. It's not really my fault. The world glamorizes the profession so much that every child wanted to be one," he said with a light chuckle. "Even after I was diagnosed as quirkless I didn't give up." Todoroki brought it up, "But you did when you turned bad. When I met All Might, the hero who gave me hope, and found out the truth about him, that he's a fraud, that the world was broken. I decided to fix it," Izuku said. "I just couldn't leave things as they are." The person asked, "And how are things? How are things so bad that you had to go down this path?" Todoroki wanted to argue, "This isn't a world of heroes and villains. It's a world where the strong are rewarded just for being strong and the weak are thrown away," but Izuku went on. "Would you believe your teacher All Might saw no value in me simply because I don't have a quirk?" "That can't be true," the Ice Boy said to counter that. Izuku said with a sad smile, but it is. Back before I became Apotheosis, I actually got to meet All Might and had interesting conversation with him. I asked if it was possible for me to be a hero without a quirk. He said no, that it wasn't possible, but the sad irony is that All Might is quirkless himself. He's only borrowing someone else's power, he went on. So even the number one hero doesn't believe that hard work, courageous spirit and determination makes a hero, it's all about power. Todoroki wanted to say, that's not true, because people with quirks work hard to improve their skills. They had some hard times. Izuku raised an eyebrow and said, oh really, Katsuki Bakugo is in your class. Do you honestly believe someone like him is hero material? The answer from Shoto was, yes, right away. Izuku sighed and pinched the bridge of his nose. When you say that, you're thinking of his quirk. Look at Bakugo as a person. Does he give people hope? Does he make them laugh? Is he a good person who does the right thing? Or does he only do what he wants? Sometimes people do things because they want to, not because they know it's the right thing to do. Izuku knew the difference, and his time with Stain taught him that there are other heroes like him. He thought about his classmate for a while. It seemed like Bakugo was always mad for no reason and was rude, loud, spoiled, cocky, and self-centered. He wasn't even close to being a hero if he was being honest. Perhaps he just needs the right help, Todoroki said to defend him. When Izuku asked Shoto Todoroki, tell me, have you, any of your classmates, or any of your teachers done anything to change his behavior? The other boy looked at him with a smile because he didn't have an answer right away. Or does Bakugo just bark and everyone lets it go because he's cool and strong? Todoroki's silence made him sure of his point. I know about him because we went to the same middle school, he said with a frown as he thought about how that jerk had hurt him. The half-and-half boy stood still and listened to Midoriya rant. Bakugo was a bully who constantly made fun of me and threatened me. He even told me to kill myself once. Does that sound like a hero to you? Yet despite his personality, his violent demeanor, and his school record attesting to the bullying, he still got into the prestigious UA. Shoto said, you must really hate him. I despise him. He's not the only one you know. There are many more people like Bakugo out there and they get everything they want because of their flashy powerful quirks. Izuku said, are you starting to see what is wrong with society? Let's say you're right. How would you fix it? Todoroki asked. He chose to think about the chance that the hero system was broken. He didn't pay attention to the voice in his head that kept telling him that his father was the perfect example of all the things Midoriya thought were wrong with their society. Congratulations. Now you're a step closer to the conclusion I came to, Izuku said. The only way to fix it is to obtain the greatest power in the world and use it to dethrone those that rule our society. Then I'll be the one to make the rules and those who I deem unworthy won't be allowed to be heroes in my world. By beating All Might, even if you beat the world's strongest hero, other heroes would rise up to stop you. Midoriya laughed, and Todoroki paused. While shaking his head, Izuku said, oh no. You really aren't seeing the bigger picture here. His goal was to get rid of the kings above him, so he asked, do you honestly think All Might is the king on the chessboard I'm playing against? That was enough of me and my evil plan. It was time for you to answer some of my questions, Izuku said with his big green eyes. Shoto didn't answer when asked, why do you never use your fire quirk? Come on. Think of me as a friend, talk to me. Todoroki said, we're not friends because you're a bad guy. That makes us enemies. Izuku laughed at him and said, calling us enemies means you're a threat to me, which you're not right now. Plus we have some time to kill before I hunt down your friends like dogs and take my stone. My father. Todoroki paused, then decided to keep stalling. Is the number 2 hero endeavor. Izuku laughed and said, yes, I know, after all, he had done his work. Shoto spoke in a solemn tone. For years he's been obsessed with beating All Might and cares nothing but that goal. Endurance sounded a lot like Kachan when she said, that rings a bell. When he realized he couldn't do it, he decided to have a child that would be better than All Might for him. He married my mother because of her quirk so that they could have a child with both of their quirks. Todoroki's frown got worse as he thought about his mother. I'm the 4th of his offspring. Izuku joked, let me guess, you were the lucky one to be born with both, right? I wouldn't call it luck, Todoroki said with a frown. He put me through hell, training me day and night, just so I could surpass All Might. And Izuku touched the left side of his own face to show the other person the scar. "Did he do this to you?" he asked. That wasn't what Todoroki said. "No, my mother did that when she finally couldn't take living with that man anymore. She called my left side unsightly, and after the incident my father had her locked up in a hospital. Ever since then I vowed to be the #1 hero without using my left side. I'll deny him what he wants most," Izuku said with a loud chuckle. "Deny him? By giving him what he wants?" asked the boy with green hair. "That's stupid. If you really wanted to get back at your father, then you wouldn't become a hero. That would be the ultimate revenge if you ask me, but no, you're doing exactly as he planned for you, except you're only hurting yourself." Todoroki said, "I don't think you'll get it. Because I'm quirkless, right? I can't possibly understand the pressure of having a pro-hero as a father or to be blessed with such great quirk," Izuku said with disdain. "You have so much power and yet you're squandering it because of some daddy issues. How pathetic." Todoroki got up from his seat after hearing Yaoyorozu's subtle message through the communicator in his ear. "I guess we can't see eye to eye," he said. "Good, everyone is where they should be." He stood up and asked, "Are we done talking now?" Izuku smiled and laughed. "Thoughts of. And we were having such a wonderful conversation," formed on Shoto's right arm as he got ready. "Come now, you don't actually believe your pathetic half-powered self can beat me? Alone no less." When Todoroki saw Midoriya's confused face, he couldn't help but smirk. "What makes you think I'm alone?" Izuku asked as he saw a big shadow move over him. He quickly looked up and saw the body of a big plane crash down on top of him. Iida had used his quirk to make it fall faster, which sped up the crash. Just as the shield hit Izuku, he instinctively raised his shield. While the plane was still in the air, Uraraka called out, "Release," and freed Tenya from the effects of her quirk. He was able to ask, "Did that get him?" as he landed safely next to the crash site. He yelled, "Keep going. I don't think that will slow him down, watch out." The crashed plane went off in a bright red cloud, and the metal tore apart like paper. Up in the middle, Midoriya was on his knees, holding up the gauntlet while screaming. "Ha!" Izuku got back on his feet and pushed the pieces away from him. He yelled in anger and threw the broken pieces of metal right at Iida. The young hero in training quickly got away from everyone. Before Kirishima could drop kick him, Izuku turned and flash sped away. Midoriya said, "I see, so you all stayed to set a trap for me. Smart, but stupid." He blocked the ice that was aimed at him and threw pieces of it at the blue-haired boy. He was shocked and said, "Whoa." Luckily, his ability to harden took the damage he could have taken. The next one to attack was Iida, who rushed in from behind. When Izuku saw him coming, he made a portal in front of him and one on the ground behind him. Iida was shocked when he flew right through it and was then kicked in the back. With a very small amount of strength, Izuku threw him away from one for all. Momo watched the fight from a hidden place and asked, "What was that?" It was her job to figure out how Midoriya's gauntlet worked and what powers it gave him. He seemed to be very good at changing and manipulating matter, but that strength was too strong for him right now. She added, he must also have some kind of enhanced strength, to the list of his skills and used it as part of a plan to beat him. Izuku yelled, "That won't be enough," and blew Shoto away with a flick of his finger before he could throw more ice at him. "Take this." He raised his foot and stomped on the ground, drawing out more one for all power from the Power Stone. In a split second, a crater appeared, and Izuku sat in the middle of it. It hurt so much that he hissed, "Ow," and quickly used the Time Stone to fix the damage. What?" Shoto asked in shock. The Iida was also frozen with fear. Kirishima ended with, "Hell. What's this?" Izuku asked as he rose a little higher in the air. "Oh no, you were all doing so well. You caught me off guard with your attacks," he sighed in disappointment. He slapped his hands together and said, "And now you're all frozen in fear. Don't be scared. Keep fighting, heroes. I'd hate to see you give up now." Izuku made a joke. His words made them move right away. The two of them talked through their communicators. Mama said, "Uraraka now, right?" Ochako lifted a bunch of junk cars into the air as her classmates got closer. One of the floating cars was set off by Iida's rocket-powered kick. Kirishima punched the second one with all his strength, and Ochako hit the others with a big metal beam that she made weightless. "That's the spirit," Izuku said with a bigger grin as the rusty cars came flying at him from the side and Todoroki's ice struck him from behind. In the air, he didn't even move. Instead, he flicked his finger at the ice without turning around, breaking it all. With a simple wave of his gauntlet, he took apart the first car that got close to him. In the last one, he just held out his armored left hand and touched it. In the first one, he punched it with the power stone. One of the space stone's powers worked, and a blue aura wrapped around the object, locking it in place in space. Very good. A combination attack. I was wondering when you would get smart and combine your quirks. He cheered them on. Or are they? The green-haired teen then saw the small communicators on their ears and quickly began to figure out what was going on. Someone else is giving them plans, he said, but he couldn't see who it was. Hide, huh? As Uraraka, Todoroki, Iida, and Kirishima got closer, he warped out of there, leaving no trace. He's gone, the redhead said as she looked around for the bad guy. Shoto told them through his radio, keep an eye out, he's got to be somewhere. He vanished, do you have eyes on him? Momo looked around with her binoculars and said, I don't see Midoriya. She told them to spread out and find him. If they did, they should let everyone know. Yaoyorozu kept a close eye on things from afar as the group split up to look around the junkyard. A hand slowly took the binoculars from her hands, and she stopped moving. Izuku Midoriya grabbed the thing and said, well hello Momo Yaoyorozu. Quirk creation, and one of the few students to get into UA on recommendation, the girl with dark hair said as she quickly backed away. He laughed and held up his hands. Calm down, I'm just here to see who has my stone. As Izuku started to say, no one has to get hurt as long as you. He was cut off when a long, wet object wrapped around his right arm. Is that a tongue? That's gross. Tsuyu took off her mask. Yaoyorozu had hid her in case Midoriya found out where they were. Tsuyu, run! Momo used her magic to make a smoke bomb and threw it at the boy's feet. Please, Izuku said with a laugh, flicking the smoke away. But Momo threw a flash grenade after the smoke, which caught him off guard. Izuku put his arm over his eyes as it went off. He looked around and saw that Momo and Tsuyu were gone when it was over. After saying, damn it, and warping away again, he chose a different path. Uraraka eh? Where is he? Ochako stopped in her tracks as she walked toward the place where the flashbang happened. She felt someone behind her. She turned around and saw Izuku step out of another portal that had opened. He smiled and said, hello Uraraka, as he walked up to her. It's been a while. You look good. I see May made that staff for you, he said, pausing when he saw her take a scared step back. Are you scared of me? He asked with a sad sigh. She asked, why? Izuku frowned and said, you know why. He moved closer to her and said, you've seen it for yourself. I never tried to hide the fact that people look down on people like me. What I do seems horrible, yes, but I'm doing this for people like me. Not just the quirkless, but anyone who was weak and was never given the opportunity to be strong because of people like All Might keeping them down. Ochako shook her head and said, I don't get it. You're a good person. Why be a villain for such a cause? I don't think of myself as a bad guy, Izuku said with a small laugh. Uraraka. I think of myself more as a revolutionary. Tell me, if there was something very wrong with the world, what would you be willing to do to fix it? Ochako didn't say anything because he didn't know what to say. Izuku sighed and turned away from her, saying, that's what I thought. How can you call yourself a hero if you're not willing to sacrifice everything for the greater good of the world? Wait. She reached out to grab his shoulder, but his strength pushed her hand away. He walked back through the portal and left without even touching Uraraka. When you find the same answer I did, come talk to me then, he said. If he had hurt her on purpose, it would have made him feel bad. Kirishima Eijiro took a worried look around. Things weren't going the way he had hoped. He thought that they might have a better chance if he showed up, but his friend hadn't replied to his text message yet. As Izuku climbed on top of a broken-down truck, he called out, Eijiro Kirishima. Kirishima took a cautious step back since he was now by himself. Quirk. Hardening, that's a very strong defense, isn't it? Shall we put it to the test? Or do you want to tell me which one of you has the soul stone? Kirishima said, sorry man, that's not going to happen. That's too bad, Midoriya said as the car he was standing on rose into the air. With one kick, he threw the rusty car at the redhead. Kirishima got tougher and crossed his arms to take the blow. The truck hit him and then broke into a million pieces. When the engine belt from the wreckage came to life and wrapped around his neck, he wasn't ready for it. Midoriya held his gauntlet out to Kirishima while he was being lifted into the air. The redhead choked and gasped as he kicked his feet and clawed at the belt around his throat that was getting tighter. "You may have a hard shell, like a turtle, but like our dear friend the turtle, you still need to breathe," the friend said. Izuku laughed as he continued to choke him and said, "Make a hand sign if you want to tell me where my stone is." He wasn't going to kill him, but to bluff well, you had to act like you were going to kill your opponent. When the teen with green hair heard a word yelled, he stopped. It was something he hadn't heard in over a year. Deku. Izuku turned around just in time to see Katsuki charge across the room. He smiled and let go of Kirishima. Then he built a wall to block the explosion. The Bakugo jumped back. "You jerk." Katsuki seemed ready for the fight. He was dressed as a superhero and had grenade gauntlets on. It made Kirishima happy that Bakugo got his message and came to help. Izuku laughed and said, "Well, if it isn't Kachan, and here I thought today couldn't get any better." He reached out with the gauntlet and tried to hit the mean kid where the brat was standing. Bakugo was only saved because he thought quickly and blasted himself out of the area. A great example of what's wrong with the world is brought right to his karmic justice, Izuku said with a big smirk. "I couldn't have asked for a better gift." He replied with a smile, "I'm going to kick your ass so hard that they'll have to pick up pieces of you all over this junkyard." This made him mad. The old Deku was always scared of him, as he should have been, but the new Deku wasn't even moving. He was very angry about it. Trying to act tough even though you're still a quirkless loser. He said, "Let's see if you can beat a loser with no quirks and his infinity gauntlet." Katsuki charged at him with his right arm ready to attack. Izuku tipped his body to the left before it hit him. He then grabbed it with both hands, flipped him over, and slammed him into the ground. Katsuki coughed because his lungs lost air. Izuku raised his foot and was about to stomp Kachan. "Really starting with the right hook?" he asked. When Kirishima tried to tackle him, he was stopped. Izuku quickly pushed the redhead away, used the reality stone to pick up a nearby broken fridge, and threw it at him. A blast from Bakugo almost knocked him off his feet before he could brag. Iida kicked him hard in the back before he could fight back. "Nice try," Izuku said as he blocked the next kick with his strong hand. Izuku didn't see Katsuki get away and grab the pin of his left grenade gauntlet while he was blocking his attacks. Bakugo yelled, "Get out of the way, Four Eyes," as he pulled the pin. From the end of his support item, a huge explosion came out. Iida quickly moved out of harm's way just as the bullet went right by him. Izuku stood in front of the destructive wave with a smug grin on his face and let it take over him. Bakugo smiled because he thought he had him. That thrill quickly faded as everyone watched the blast suddenly fall apart. The explosion was taken in by Izuku's gauntlet and squished into a small orb in the palm. He stood there without getting hurt at all. "RAHH!" The boy with green hair screamed and pointed the orb at the boy who used to pick on him. He then shot the bully a beam of concentrated heat and force from the explosion. Katsuki was lucky that Kirishima pushed him out of the way and took the full blast himself, using his hardening quirk to protect himself. But that didn't stop him from being thrown across the junkyard. Izuku laughed and said, "Huh? Now look at that, Kachan, your boyfriend saved you." If you say, "Damn you," Bakugo will charge him from the front, and Iida will come in from behind. As the explosion went off, Izuku put up his barrier and opened a warp gate to block Tenya's attack. When the class representative was warped straight to Midoriya's right, it caught him off guard. The bad guy with the gauntlet hit him in the face with a backhand, which broke his helmet. When the helmet fell, Izuku picked it up and threw it at Katsuki's head. When the blonde dove, Izuku flash jumped forward and slammed his elbow into the chest of the girl who used to pick on him. "Goo!" Bakugo coughed and fell backwards. "What's wrong, Kachan? You haven't hit me once," Izuku asked him with a smirk as he floated in the air. "I thought you were going to be the #1 hero?" Katsuki growled at Deku, "Shut up," as he got up and wiped the spit out of his mouth. Izuku's strength pushed him to the ground. "And now for the coup de grace, he said. Suddenly, something that looked a lot like Eraserhead's capture weapon quickly wrapped around his gauntlet. As the battle was ending, he saw Yaoyorozu trying to take the device off of his hand. "Nice try," Izuku said. He was about to use his right hand to pull them off, but Tsuyu quickly tangled his arm with a long tongue. After that, Uraraka and Iida pulled on the other end of a grapple claw that was attached to a tether and wrapped around his middle. He was pulled to the ground with a few tugs. It was like his feet were frozen to the ground before he could throw them off. A small glacier of ice went up his legs and body and stopped just below his neck. No matter how hard he thrashed, it wouldn't break. Damn it, he was stuck. When Kirishima finally joined the group again, he asked, "Did you get him?" He had a few small burns. Momo told them to get over here and hold this tight. The redhead did what she said and held on tight to the capture weapon while she worked to figure out how to get Midoriya out of the gauntlet. Izuku yelled in anger, "This won't keep me down for long." The thing that made him most angry was his pride for thinking that they could never be a threat to him. The grapple staff that Ochako used on his right arm made Uraraka, Iida, and Tsuyu all pin that arm down. As planned, Todoroki kept his right hand on the ice prison that the bad guy was in and kept making it stronger. "It's really tight on his arm," Yaoyorozu said as she had trouble with the gadget. Izuku purposely closed his fist to make things harder for her as he looked at her with anger in his eyes. Along with Uraraka, Iida yelled, "What's taking so long?" as they dug their feet into the ground. It was hard for Tsuyu to keep her tongue around the green-haired boy's arm without getting hot. For some reason, these strange green sparks that kept shooting out of his skin were making his strength change. Bakugo yelled, "Hurry up and get that damn thing off of him," while keeping his other grenade aimed and ready to fire in case Deku got away. Kirishima told her, "You need to open up the fingers," as he held on very tight. Izuku glared at everyone and said, "They got me." When other people touched him, he couldn't flash warp away. Even though people touched his body or the gauntlet, they would not be affected by time stopping. After being hit by the Reality Stone blast, he would be open to an attack in return. He would hurt his spine and other parts of his body too badly if he used one for all through the Power Stone. He wouldn't be able to heal in time for Kacchan to blow up and hurt him even more. "Hey, Kacchan. Wait a minute." When an interesting thought came to Izuku, he smiled like the devil. "Not so tough now, are you, Deku?" Katsuki asked with a grin, thinking he had won. He laughed and said, "You like to talk, but you know I should thank you, Kacchan," Izuku said. He looked down at Momo, who was having trouble opening his gauntlet's fingers. The blonde teen scowled at him and asked, "What the hell are you talking about, nerd?" "Did you see the news?" Izuku asked. The other person shot him a sharp look that told him he had. "You saw All Might's true form." "Yes, you did." He knew that Bakugo's pride and temper were his biggest weaknesses, so he wasn't sure what to think. He laughed in a dark way. "Do you know why he's so weak now? Shall I tell you?" Izuku looked at Bakugo and said, "It was the fight against the Master of the League of Villains. That battle pushed him past his limit and made his body even weaker than it was before." Bakugo kept quiet. Not only was the blonde mad at Deku for bringing up his kidnapping, but he was also mad at himself for getting caught in the first place. "Remind me why he was there again." "Oh, that's right, to rescue you." When Kirishima saw that familiar murderous look in his friend's eye, he called out, "Dude! Whatever you're thinking, don't do it." Momo was only just able to take off the gauntlet a centimeter at a time. Izuku laughed and said, "That's right, Kacchan. It was because of you. You're going to make such a wonderful villain in the future. I can see it now." The blonde man said, "Shut up," through his teeth. Katsuki was now shaking with anger. Katsuki Bakugo. The boy who helped cripple All Might. That was it. Bakugo lost it and charged at the nerd with his hand raised. Everyone yelled, "Don't, D." Katsuki hit Izuku in the face just as Yaoyorozu knocked the gauntlet off of Izuku's arm. The force blew her back right away, and she lost her grip. It was easy for the other students to let go of his arms, and they all fell back. Shoto was also knocked back, and he had to let go of his ice shield to protect his face and body. When the smoke finally cleared, the frozen cocoon that Midoriya was inside was now empty, with a broken hole where Bakugo's attack had hit. When they heard slow clapping not far away, they all stopped moving. Midoriya stood there with ice still stuck to his skin and clothes. He had light burns on his face and his hair was even messier than it was before. He was thrown off by the explosion and was able to quickly warp out of there. Without Momo, there was nothing stopping the power of the space stone. Izuku stopped clapping and held up his gauntlet, putting 2 fingers together to do his own super move. He then said, "Like I said, Kachan. You're so predictable," he said. With only 10% of the stone's power, he snapped his fingers and the blast blew most of the students away. Kirishima was just close enough to catch the girl frog. Sad to say, Izuku saw this and used his telekinetic powers to grab him. Then he threw them hard against a small pile of broken robot parts and appliances. When they hit each other, they were both knocked out. 2 down and Izuku was about to say when an explosion hit him in the back. As Bakugo jumped over his old friend from childhood, he started setting off as many bombs as he could. Every single one of them was sucked into a small warp gate that Izuku made between them. He threw himself at Izuku, who was still grinning, and screamed, "Ha!" The bad guy with green hair blocked his hands with his gauntlet, and since they were close, he hit his bully in the head, pushing him back. Izuku looked back and saw the old smelting factory far away. He shook the stars off his head. He reached out with his infinity gauntlet and used the power and reality stones together to come up with another sneaky plan. The building shook violently and fell apart quickly. He made a painful groan sound as he pulled on it, and blood came out of his nose. Izuku yelled, "Ha!" and yanked his arm toward the blonde. Big pieces of the big abandoned building flew across the junkyard and landed on top of Bakugo while he crossed the warp gate. Katsuki yelled, "Shit!" as he tried to avoid the falling things but was too slow and was caught in the impact. Metal and other junk pieces fell all over the area. Tenya he quickly avoided the falling objects while carrying Ochako on his back. The girl was knocked out after hitting her head. He chose to take her somewhere safe, away from all the chaos, before going back to get the others and leaving. It looks like they had a very wrong idea of how powerful Midoriya was. He tripped and fell forward all of a sudden. The dirt he was running on got soft like quicksand and sucked his foot in. Izuku quickly caught Uraraka when it flew off his back. "It's nice to see you again, Tenya Iida," Izuku said as he held the girl in his arms. Iida fought as he was dragged to the ground and put on his knees. He was glared at by the engine boy who said, "Apotheosis." Izuku smiled at him and said, "You can call me by my real name." Iida was still being slowly sunk into the ground when he put Ochako down on the ground. It was Iida who asked, "Why?" Now he was up to his waist. "When you saved me from the hero killer, you taught me how a real hero should act." Izuku frowned as he thought about it. Was all that talk about making a real hero just a lie? Answer me. Iida was close to being buried at this point. While he was up to the boy's neck in water, he stopped and said, "That's still my one true goal." This gave the boy room to breathe but not get away. "I want to put an end to this broken hero society and create a new better one." She tried to say, "There's nothing wrong with this hero society." Izuku turned away and put his gauntlet on Ochako's unconscious head, making the boy flinch and worry about what he was going to do to her. "You only say that because you're still blind to the truth," he said. Izuku told Tenya Iida, "Look around, really look with your eyes, and you'll see what's wrong with this society." He then used the time stone to heal Ochako's head injury and left her there without hurting her. "When you come to the same conclusion I did, come talk to me then." With that, he closed the warp gate and walked inside. Shoto the youngest Todoroki desperately tried to stop all the falling debris while looking around desperately for any of his classmates. For all he knew, they were buried under a pile of metal and broken things. He stopped when Midoriya walked through a portal in front of him. Izuku said with a sly grin, "I think it's time we picked up where we left off, Todoroki." Shoto glared at his enemy and hit him with as much ice as he could. The bad guy with messy hair raised his fist over his gauntlets, sent one for all through the green stone, and punched the ice, breaking it like glass. Damn it, Todoroki tried again, but this time he aimed a beam of ice at him. Though Izuku raised an eyebrow at the small change, he didn't think it was dangerous. He just pointed his open hand at the ice and used the power of the reality stone to turn it into water right away. He also made bubbles in that water to make fun of the half and half boy. Toriku was teased, "That's all you got, Todoroki? Where's the fire?" Shoto would always tell his father, I refuse to use that jerk's power. If you act like that, how do you think you'll be a hero? Izuku glared at him. I'm sorry ma'am, I couldn't save your daughter because I have severe daddy issues. That's you, that's the hero you're going to be in the future. He was about to say, you know why I won't, but was cut off before he could finish. He was told by Izuku, you don't have a choice anymore Shoto Todoroki. He held out his arms and said, this is your one and only chance to stop me right now. Shoto clenched his fists and said, I can't. An angry Izuku sighed and said, will you just forget about Endeavor? You're not him, and you're not even a better version of him. You are unique, and that's something your pathetic father can never claim, he said to try to get his opponent to show his best side. He didn't do it just for the fun of it, he really wanted to help Todoroki. The guy with the two-toned hair looked like he was having a bad day. You have ice and fire. That's not the power of Endeavor, it's the amazing power of Shoto. It's all yours. It's mine, Shoto realized all of a sudden. Right then, fire broke out on his left side, lighting up the whole junkyard like a beacon. A raging fire that had been stifled for years was finally let out. Izuku did nothing but laugh and clap his hands. He said something nice, magnificent, absolutely wonderful. Doesn't it feel great to just be yourself and let go? Izuku knew how freeing it was. Shoto smiled and said, I'm beginning to think you might be crazy, to help the person trying to defeat you. Can you beat me now? That's the real question, Izuku said as he flexed his gloved hand and wrist. Shoto stood tall and pulled his left arm back. You'll find out if you try to avoid this, he said. I have no plans to dodge, Izuku said in response. If you say, give me your best, give me everything. Todoroki aimed the strongest flame he could muster straight at him. Izuku put out his huge shield to block it. He put up his barrier to stop the fire, and the power stone made it stronger. Izuku said, I'm actually being pushed back. He saw that the strong flames were making his feet slide backwards. That was great, Shoto. He tried to push down the huge stream of flames by drawing more power from the stones and saying, I'm impressed. But the flames wouldn't stop. Izuku began to sweat because Shoto was stronger than he thought. His force field broke when he wasn't paying attention for a moment, and the bad guy with the mossy hair was quickly consumed by fire. When Shoto's flames reached where Midoriya was standing, he finally stopped. A lot of smoke came from the embers, and he almost fell over. After that last attack, he had to take a moment to catch his breath. But it looked like he had won. Thoughts of victory were short-lived as he felt a metal hand grab his shoulder. Midoriya said to Shoto from behind, I'm proud of you. You got over your hatred for your father and hit me with everything you had. I was mad when Shoto said, you cheated. Izuku's top was completely gone, burned off, showing a toned upper body covered in light burns that seemed to be healing by some strange yellow energy. Did I? He asked himself. As he said, I took your fire head on, but it was too much for me, and I had to warp away. You did well, and you'll make a great hero in the future. Then he turned Todoroki around and punched him in the face, knocking him out. That was interesting, Izuku said as he looked down at the other Persona's dead body. He quickly stretched out his hand and grabbed a small cannonball that was being shot at him. He turned to face Momo, who was standing nearby with a cannon and said, a sneak attack on Yaoyorozu. I like that. Actually, it's just a distraction, Yaoyorozu said as he put down the cannon and pulled out a trigger. When Midoriya turned it on, the metal ball in his hand exploded into a carbon fiber net that wrapped around his body. This again? Izuku asked. He grabbed a piece of the net with both hands and tore it apart like tissue after making green sparks of energy from the power stone. You know, I think I'm getting the hang of my new stone. All Might's power is hard to control in large amounts, but in small amounts it works wonders for me, he said with a laugh, letting slip whose power he was now using. He really liked how Momo's face turned pale with shock. What are you going to do now, Momo Yaoyorozu? He asked as he walked slowly toward her. At first, she didn't think this would lead to anything. No, she desperately tried to calm her doubts by telling herself, I can do this. The plan would work. She was upset, so Izuku stopped and gave her a moment to calm down and be careful. Even though he didn't think she was a big threat, he decided to keep an eye out for any traps after these students had caught him. Momo took a deep breath and took something from her pocket that was glowing out. When Izuku finally saw his soul stone, his eyes got narrow. What are you doing? He didn't understand as she pointed her bare hand at him. She used her quirk to make something to cover her limb. He laughed when he became aware of what it was. It was made of metal and chrome and looked a lot like his own infinity gauntlet. The back of the palm had only one slot. Momo raised her own shield and said, "Let's see how you handle having your stone used against you." She thought she had a good idea of how Midoriya's device worked after all the information she learned during the fight. Enough to make a second copy of it. She told him, "Take this," as she punched the air in his direction. There was no action at all. Momo tried again, but the stone still didn't do anything or react. Izuku laughed at her and said, "Ha, he kept making fun of her, you didn't really think that would work. You're smart, Yaoyorozu, but you can't even begin to understand how complicated my infinity gauntlet is," he said with a cocky grin. "Let me guess, you essentially tried to make a remote control. Using electrical pulses to forcefully activate the power inside the stone." Her eyes widened in shock. She made her own gauntlet just that way. She was sure that was how it worked. How complicated did Midoriya's infinity gauntlet really get? "I know because I did the same thing wrong when I built the first prototype," he said with a laugh, fondly remembering his past mistakes. "Even if you made a perfect copy, it wouldn't matter," Izuku said, pointing his machine at the ground in front of them. "The Soul Stone's power doesn't work on someone like me," he said with a sad frown. He pulled on the dirt, which made it slide toward him. This made the ground under Yaoyorozu's feet act like a treadmill. Izuku put out his right hand to catch her and said, "Give me the stone now." He was hit from behind by an explosion just as she reached out to grab him. The word, K, didn't hurt him, but it did surprise him. As he turned around, he saw Bakugo, who was hurt and bleeding a little. Momo took the chance to leave, which made Izuku mad. Katsuki snarled, "You damn nerd. Throw another building at me and see what happens." He was able to avoid some of the falling debris, but he had to use his quirk to its fullest to avoid the rest. Even so, he still took a few hits. Izuku smiled and said, "I thought you'd be fine. How do you expect to surpass All Might if you can't handle that much?" The blonde growled, "Just shut up already." Izuku glared at him and said, "No," he told the person who used to pick on him, "the time you can talk down to me is over. You know, Kachan, the day I knew the truth about All Might was the same day I knew the truth about you," the other boy said. The other boy just stared at him with crossed swords. "You're just a child playing at being a hero. That's all you've ever been and that's all you'll ever be." He yelled back, "And what are you? A cry-baby who's upset because he couldn't be a hero without a quirk?" Izuku laughed at his insult. "I have no interest in being a hero anymore. I've got a much greater goal in mind," he stated. He laughed darkly, "I'm going to make a new hero society, and you Katsuki Bakugo won't be a part of it." Katsuki yelled at him, "By the time I'm done, they won't even remember you," and ran at him. As he said, "Come on," Izuku shook his head and held out his gauntlet to protect himself from the explosion he knew was coming. The explosion made a big cloud of smoke that made it hard for him to see. He was pushed back against a wall of scrap metal behind Midoriya by Katsuki, who then hit him hard with more explosions. Bakugo yelled, "Do you remember me now?" as he continued to blast him. Izuku had enough, so he pushed through the explosions and punched him in the face. The blonde's face hit the dirt from that fist. Izuku walked toward Bakugo as he got up and spat out the blood from his mouth. Izuku asked him with a smirk, "Is that it?" Katsuki growled and charged at him again. Using his quirk, he moved around the bad guy in a crazy way, hoping to find a weak spot to attack. Another thing that hit him was a big truck tire that came out of nowhere. Izuku laughed and said, "Oops," he yelled and jumped to his feet, shooting himself straight at Midoriya while dodging the earth pillars that came up from the ground. He turned around and kicked Midoriya in the head. He then put his boot on the boy's infinity gauntlet and held it there while the blonde threw an explosion right at him. As the smoke went away, Izuku felt something wet on his cheek. He reached up with his other hand and felt a small cut. The time stone wouldn't even help heal it. Izuku looked at the small red mark on the tip of his finger and smiled. All that for a drop of blood? He laughed to himself as he threw Bakugo off of his gadget. Katsuki stumbled back, which let him rush in and hit the hero student in the face and stomach several times with powerful punches. He said, "Gah," and tried to protect himself with his left arm, but with one punch, the grenade gauntlet broke. Katsuki was thrown through the air by a strong uppercut. Izuku put his hands together to make a fake cheer. Look at you go. It was hard for Bakugo to get back on his feet and clear his mind of the dizziness. Wouldn't it be easier just to stay down? You can't beat me, Kachan, no matter how hard you try. Katsuki spat. I thought I told you to shut up, you damn nerd, as he finally steadied himself. He said with determination, I'll beat you. Heroes always win, so that's what I'll do. No matter what, he wouldn't let Deku beat him. So then, Izuku's face turned dark. If you can't win, then you're not a hero, right? He asked with a laugh, then smirked at the teen with spiked blonde hair. Izuku asked Katsuki Bakugo, what makes you think you deserve to win? Do you know what you are? He then started to list all the bad things that the other boy had done. You couldn't beat that slime villain. You lost to me once before at USJ. You couldn't make Todoroki use his full power at the sports festival. You failed to beat All Might in your exam. You got captured by the League of Villains, and you failed your provisional license exam. Do you know why? It's because you're a loser? Bakugo's eyes widen. You've always been a loser. That's why you insult and bully others to hide your own weak, self-hating feelings. The blonde was shaking at how Izuku was describing him and listing all the things that were wrong with his once perfect record. He said, Deku, through clenched teeth. He made a circle with his left hand and fired a big explosion through the small hole he made with his hand. The explosion was sped up and turned into a beam, which was his famous armor-piercing shot. Izuku smiled and raised his gauntlet, making the barrier around it stronger so that the beam could be split in two. He moved slowly toward Katsuki while blocking his super move at the same time. As soon as he got close enough, he pushed forward and hit the student in the face with his backhand. Bakugo was about to pull the pin on his last grenade and bomb his old friend straight in the head, but Izuku grabbed his arm guard with his own. Then he hit the other person with a red energy pulse that destroyed his grenade and broke his right arm 3 times. Raw. He used his left arm to throw Midoriya's chest with the biggest explosion he could muster, even though it hurt with his broken right arm. Where Izuku used to be, the blast made a huge column of fire and smoke. Bakugo couldn't stop coughing, and his left arm felt dislocated but not broken like his right. An arm made of gold reached out from the black smoke, grabbed Katsuki by the throat, and lifted him off the ground. The man gasped, but his arms were too weak and didn't work right to fight. With a happy grin on his face, Izuku came out of the smoke. From bright green to red, blue, and yellow, his big eyes changed color until they were back to their normal emerald color. This is checkmate, Kachan, he said. His time stone quickly healed the cuts and burns on his tight, bare chest. It looks like Katsuki's explosion did, in fact, get through his epidermal barrier. How? Bakugo asked as he tried to speak with the other person's hand on his throat. How are people like you so strong? He looked him in the eyes for a while before answering. Izuku told the truth, because I was born weak. He pointed his right fist back and said, I know what it's like to be weak, and that's what makes me strong. Then he used a little one for all to punch Katsuki in the gut so hard that he had to throw up. When the blonde was defeated, he threw him to the ground and made him kneel facing the other way while holding his spiked hair in place with one hand. Now then, Kachan, don't be sad, you're going to help me for once, he said in the other person's ear. He spoke out loud, okay Yaoyorozu. You can come out now. Izuku counted to 10 and saw that nothing went as planned. He tried again, but got silence in response. If you want Bakugo to live, you will show yourself. Have it your way. Wait. Momo finally came out from behind a group of old, rusty cars. Don't hurt him. It is up to you. Izuku smiled at her. Whether I do anything to him or not is up to you. It was true that he didn't want to kill any of these heroes in training. He said, the thing is Yaoyorozu. I really like you. Not just you, all of you UA students who came here to try and stop me. I admire your courage to face an opponent that is so much stronger than you. I would feel so terrible killing any of you guys. Katsuki here on the other hand, well, I hate his guts. He's everything I despise and I wouldn't lose an ounce of sleep splattering him all over this junkyard. Because Izuku wanted to kill Bakugo, he was sweating and thought, he's bluffing. He has to be. Izuku looked very angry at Momo and said, you can save his life. All you have to do is give me my soul stone. You can choose. I'll even make it easy for you. He put his infinity gauntlet on Bakugo's shoulder and began to push the power to change matter through him. Katsuki screamed in pain as a red aura wrapped around his body. Hurts, doesn't it, Kachan? That's the feeling of your molecules slowing, being pulled apart. You know, I've always wondered what it would look like when a person's entire molecular structure was disassembled in an instant. Shall we see? Momo yelled at him. Stop. Izuku stopped hurting the girl who used to pick on him and paid attention to her. The girl with dark hair took the glowing purple stone out of her pocket with a lot of fear. She threw it at him with a heavy sigh. Midoriya grabbed it with his right hand and laughed. He laughed even more and said, "Yes, my beautiful soul stone. Good job, Yaoyorozu." Momo gasped at him. "I must compliment you on such a good forgery." She had figured it out so quickly. "But how?" she asked, but he cut her off with a laugh. "Come on, you don't think I can't tell the difference between a real and a fake stone?" he said as he crushed the fake soul stone in his hand and saw the tiny sparks coming from the microchips that were put inside. A fake stone with a tracking chip hidden inside. "That's very smart, but I'm just going to take Bakugo's legs for that," Katsuki said as he got ready to do what he said. Momo begged, "No, wait." She quickly took the real stone out of her other pocket. Izuku stopped and said, "That's better." With a serious frown on his face and an alert eye on her, he said, "Walk over to me and put it in my hand." As he told her to, Yaoyorozu slowly made her way over to him, looking with concern at her fellow classmate, who was lying on his knees and panting. The bad guy, who wasn't wearing a shirt, smiled and held out his right hand for her to touch. Slowly, Momo did what he was told and put the stone in his palm. He whispered, "Thank you," as he held the gem triumphantly in his hands. She glared at him and said, "You got what you wanted, now let Bakugo go." His wide smile said, "Of course." He then threw Katsuki into a pile of trash and scrap metal. He laughed, which made the girl's eyes widen in shock. "Oh, and just so you know, I was bluffing and was never going to kill him." He looked happy as he put the soul stone in the last open slot of his gauntlet, which was in the palm of his hand. "Ah!" Izuku screamed as the new power rushed through him. It was a stronger feeling than any of the other stones. He had neon purple patterns on his body that looked like nerves, and his eyes were the same color. The shockwave that he sent out almost knocked Momo off his feet. He was still standing there. After the pain went away, he looked down at the soul stone and his finished infinity gauntlet. He smiled with pride because he had finally finished making the best invention ever. Izuku made a portal behind him and stepped back into it. "I'd love to keep playing with you all, but I have bigger things to do. Farewell, Momo Yaoyorozu." He waved at her and said, "Give my regards to your friends." He then shut the door, leaving her alone for a short time. "Where did he go?" Kirishima asked as he came in carrying Tsuyu, who was barely awake. Uraraka came after him and looked completely unharmed. Iida was lying next to her, covered in dirt. After getting better, Todoroki also showed up, walking over to Yaoyorozu as she fell to her knees. He asked, "Are you okay? Did he hurt you?" The way she said, "I'm fine," was shaky and not at all fine. Momo calmed down and pointed to where Katsuki was lying in a heap, saying, "Bakugo is badly hurt. He needs medical attention. This is my fault," Uraraka said as she looked at her hurt and scared friends and felt like she was to blame for everything. The people who were after her wouldn't have come here if she hadn't. This wouldn't have happened. She did think that, and now she has to deal with what happened.
So that's it for today. I will continue the story in next part. Till then, bye bye.